We apologize for starting the meeting late, but for any questions or comments. Any questions that you ask will be written down and then will be responded to at the end of public comment time. I will bring it back to the board for any direction, if there is any direction needed. Okay, so Planning Department, Brenda Gilardi, our General Plan Coordinator.
Yes, good afternoon, Brenda Gilardi, General Plan Coordinator. And today, as Chair Callaway indicated, we will be talking about water. And as you know, this is a very important resource countywide. And it has a direct relationship with land use development and land development patterns and how land is used and divided. We're going to have two representatives today from CCWD. June Lopez, the General Manager, will speak to you very briefly with some introductory comments. And then Ed Pattison, the Water Resource Manager, will actually provide a PowerPoint presentation on our topic. And we trust that you will find the information helpful and informative, particularly as we move forward with the next phase of the general plan update. With that, I will turn the speaker over to June Lopez.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you again. It's been 6 months already. And I want to thank the Board of Supervisors and your staff for inviting us to talk about a very important issue of water in the Calaveras County. And I'm really glad to see such a great turnout. In Southern California, you don't get this kind of turnout when you talk about water issues, so this is very refreshing. And in speaking with your staff about the direction and the approach that you're taking for the general plan, we're very encouraged by that. The importance of land use and water planning being integrated cannot be emphasized enough. Just the other day, you're all familiar with our recent assessment district at Dolly Cassidy, and a lady came up to me and she said, you know, how come we were able to build when the water levels are lowering and the wells are going to fail? And I said, because historically, throughout the state, land use did their thing, water use did their thing, and rarely did we cross-reference. And more, because of recent challenges and issues, you see that happening throughout the state, a very integrated approach to planning. And that is the way of the future. And that's why we are really looking forward to this process and continue to working with you and your staff to make sure that whatever plan is, that we take the best approach, what makes the best sense for this county and its need. Now, the things that we're going to talk about today covers the entire county, and it is from CCWD's perspective. We don't presume to speak on behalf of any other water district. However, none of the things that we're going to talk about would be a surprise to anybody. These are recognized issues and challenges throughout the state, so I would think that any utility professional would agree with a lot of the things that we're going to highlight for you today. And we don't suspect that you're going to get everything in 1 hour. I mean, we can be here for weeks and we can talk about the water issue. And so we just want to give you some of the overview highlights. We'll be more than happy to follow up with more pointed, focused discussion on any of these topics. And also I wanted to emphasize CCWD's role. Our service area is the entire county. Our responsibility is to ensure water supply, wastewater service, and stewardship for the region. And in times like this, when we are asked to do more with less, it's more important than ever for regional collaboration. And we are involved in so many different aspects. We represent the region. We get tax money from all the people that live in the county. So from our perspective, everyone here is our stakeholder, and we do answer to the county and as well as the region. When we go to Sacramento, when we go to Washington, D.C., when we participate in regional planning, such as integrated regional urban managing process, we represent and we advocate for the county and the region. And this is a great opportunity for us to continue our relationship with the county and all the other water providers in our county to work together to better position ourselves to protect the very important things like water rights, which Ed will get into, and make sure that as we move forward in the future, whether it's policy or planning, that we have a strong position, a united front, and we can get what we need done for the members of our community. So I'll turn this over to now Ted Patterson. He's our water resource manager. You know him well, and he's talked to you a variety of times on water issues and then some. So we'll go through this, and anytime you have questions, please feel free to interrupt him and ask your questions. Thank you.
Would you like to recognize your board?
Oh, absolutely.
Here, please.
Good catch. I have 4 of my board members here. I'll just start in the order that I see them. We have Board President Phil McCartney. We have Director Bob Dean. And we have Director Don Stump and Vice President Jeff Davidson. And we also have some staff members here, Larry Diamond and Jeff Meyer. Thank you.
And there's some other board members here from other water districts. Would you like to, Ray? And now give your water district, please.
I'm on water district for Utica Power Authority and UPUD in Murphy's.
Okay, thank you.
Before Ed gives his presentation, I do have handouts for the board, and then there's some extras for the audience.
Bring them up. Oh, Wallace, please, don't be shy. Stand up, please. Thank you. Ed.
Well, it's good to see all the faces here again today. I'm enjoying an ongoing developing relationship with everybody, and so I really appreciate everyone turning out for this. As June mentioned, I'm open to questions from the board as I proceed through this. My goal is to get through these slides in 20 to 30 minutes to, number one, provide a foundation and a context that I think we can all agree on. And then one of the last slides, which I think is the most important, is based on our experience and our understanding of statewide issues, what are some of the solutions I think that we can partner on and build on to ensure a high-quality, affordable, and reliable water supply into the next generation. So this first slide here, I just wanted to show a little juxtaposition of dry and wet, and you'll see the dry Wallace Lake bed on the left and New Spicer Meadow Reservoir, which is at 6,500 feet on the North Fork Stanislaus. And before I really get started with my presentation, I wanted to point out that besides its people, this resource, water, is the most valuable resource the county has. And without water, this value of land is near worthless. This presentation really is a story about the imbalance between the use of surface water and groundwater, and why, if it's not corrected, this imbalance, despite Calaveras County being a source water area for much of the state, will lead toward a growing problem of water scarcity in this county that will negatively affect the social and economic outlook and well-being of our communities. I'd like to provide a little further context, and I want to point out that CCWD annually submits progress reports on water rights to the State Water Resources Control Board. That's the regulating agency for the state's water right and water users. And we submit those progress reports annually on the Stanislaus River, the Calaveras, and the McCollum. And what we've noticed over the last several years is an increasing shift to regulation and disclosure of information we've never had to submit in the past. The State Water Resources Control Board will be closely examining all aspects of this information on these three watersheds in the years to come. Their budget for enforcement has been increased with recent legislation, and as a result, water rights enforcement and a request for time extensions to develop available surface water rights will be more difficult and challenging and more expensive. The state urban water management plan, a regulated, mandated plan for water utilities of CCWD size to submit, are required to be submitted every 5 years. We're required to submit our updated urban water management plan by mid-year 2011. And I just returned from a workshop with water agencies around the state, and attorneys and other colleagues are making it clear that these urban water management plans are going to be under great scrutiny in this update, especially from downstream water users that are competing for scarce water supplies. And that leads me to my next contextual point. Water shortage. Water shortages typically occurred only during dry years. I don't know if you're aware through the headlines, but water shortages are occurring in every year now. Every year except wet years. So in every year type, there's competition for water throughout this state. And it's putting a lot of pressure and stress on the system for the water supplies. So as such, with these contextual points, the following views that I'm presenting today are based on these efforts. And again, as June pointed out, are the views of CCWD only. We also recognize the complexity of issues surrounding the general plan update and want to make it clear this presentation will be coming from a water management, water rights point of view and its role in land use planning. So my primary message today, and I'll state this message over and over again, is this: over-reliance on groundwater to meet development and agricultural needs and a resulting underdevelopment of available surface water rights. Many reasons exist for this result. The upfront cost of infrastructure, the short-term versus the long-term view. Groundwater is typically the go-to shorter-term, lower cost than surface water infrastructure. And a coordination of projects, whether urban development or agriculture, between agencies, organizations, and project proponents, and so on, are difficult to organize. So the future economic and social outlook of this county and all the communities that the residents call this home is to have a high-quality, reliable, affordable water supply, whether surface water or groundwater. For many on groundwater, this certainty has been lost, and the situation is growing worse throughout the county. It's not just the West County alluvial systems, it's also the fractured rock areas east of the 49. And if you think you can fall back on surface water, some attorneys are now arguing that the area of origin laws contained within the water code, which were placed there to protect the future build-out of source watershed areas like Calaveras, but is diverted downstream to exporting agencies. Those area of origin laws are supposed to protect our future build-out, but the attorneys are now expressing the view that don't count on area of origin. It may not be there when you need it. So what's really happening in this state is count the highest and best beneficial use, which usually means larger metropolitan coastal areas. Okay. The early visionaries that created the Calaveras County Water District envisioned waterworks throughout the county to develop irrigated ag and to some extent the communities of Calaveras. Few of these early waterworks developed, resulting in a small percentage of available surface water rights being developed. As a result of the significant upfront costs associated with surface water infrastructure, groundwater with a lower startup cost has been the go-to resource in the short term, but in the long term may be the most costly. And I don't want to be misunderstood. For some areas and some applications, groundwater as a water supply source is appropriate. However, for other applications, it may not be the best long-term choice. Therefore, this over-reliance on groundwater is resulting in both water quality and supply issues. Wells are failing throughout the county, as I mentioned, upcountry as well as in the west side, both in fractured rock and alluvial basins. Because of this significant upfront cost of surface water, a well-organized multi-agency public-private partnership may be necessary to develop the available surface water rights. To date, that partnership has been lacking. What we have witnessed over the decades really is the lack of long-term coordinated planning between county agencies, organizations, and partners in the community. It's like two ships passing in the night. The result, an uncoordinated imbalance between the use of surface water and groundwater that has potential to affect the future social and economic well-being of the county and our communities. And I want to say that it gets even better, and this is a little more of this context. There's been a raft of mandates that came out in the fall '09 legislation. Delta flow improvements, water conservation mandates, groundwater monitoring mandates, increased water rights enforcement, and collectively these new mandates could mean and will likely mean less water to the county at a higher cost. At a minimum, greater scrutiny of our surface water resources and our groundwater resources will be made by the State Water Resources Control Board. Statewide water availability is at a premium. Gone are the days when water shortages occur only during a drought. As I mentioned previously, water shortages are the new norm and occur in every year but wet years. This may not be specifically about Calaveras County, but people are fighting for water in normal years now. Competition for water as a scarce resource is entered a new era of fierce battles. Climate change, with the ongoing issues surrounding that, with the predictions for greater extremes, wetter wets, longer drier dries, are going to exacerbate this new norm of water scarcity throughout the state. And tied closely to water demands, statewide, is the new term co-equal goals. I'm sure all of you have heard the use of that term. Co-equal goals simply means registering the importance of both water demands for ag and urban as well as for the environment. But this new paradigm is putting greater stress on an already stressed water storage, use, and circulation system within the state of California. All of this is the makings of a water crisis, and I predict in the next 5 years it's going to erupt. What does this mean locally, and how does it affect us? It means less water at a higher cost, bottom line. You can expect it. And if you think you're immune to some of this because you can rely on groundwater, think of this. There's many failing wells going on around this county, and the reality is you may be next. And if we don't have a safety net, you don't have a safety net to fall back on. So I want to leave you with that point. So for today, we want to talk a little about what CCWD does and who we are, so you can help understand the foundation I'm building for our recommendations. And I think many in the audience may not be fully aware of what CCWD does within Calaveras County, so I want to just briefly step through that. But as we unfold this story today, it's helpful for us to understand our role in water management and how it relates to land use planning. As a county-wide service provider with water rights in all 3 watersheds that course through Calaveras County, a partner in regional water negotiations, both upstream and downstream, an agency with a legislative program that ranges from Sacramento to Washington, D.C., CCWD is in a unique position to present this overview of water issues in the county and why it's important to manage the intersection of water management and land use planning and the proposed solutions that I will conclude this presentation with. So that everyone understands, CCWD was established in 1946 by a vote of the people, and as you see on the slide here, to manage, protect, and develop the water rights for use in Calaveras County. It was established under this charter, and I went back to the original legislation that created CCWD by the vote of the people, and it reads, and I have a brief excerpt here that I'd like to read for the audience. To provide for the acquisition of water rights, for construction thereby of waterworks, and for the acquisition of all property necessary therefore to provide for the distribution and sale of water. That's very important because it gets at the heart of the message today, the over-reliance and extraction of groundwater and the underdevelopment of surface water rights. But I think people know CCWD is a retail water and wastewater provider, but you may not know that CCWD has established a groundwater management plan adopted by the Board of Directors in 2001 for the West County Groundwater Basin. That's a part of the larger Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin. It also provides agricultural water deliveries. There's a couple of hydropower projects that we oversee. There's recycled water deliveries throughout the county. We also help provide technical and staff expertise in many areas of the county when the needs arise. We also, as I mentioned, have a legislative advocacy program that ranges from Sacramento to D.C. So my point here is that we need to get ahead of this wave and ride it. I think from my experience here, we've been spending too much time here in this position where we're reacting to events that are coming down the pike. And what we want to do is get back to where we're riding the wave in a way that gets ahead of these issues and develops the resources with the big picture in mind, to look into the future and develop a water management portfolio that will provide for the economic prosperity and social well-being of our communities, as well as our environment. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, because it's important as we discuss what the proposed solutions are, the county geographic area we have a large county in terms of area. And we have an insufficient knowledge regarding the relationship between surface water and groundwater and the movement of groundwater from the fractured rock system to the alluvial basin. This county spans 3 watersheds, as I mentioned, McCollum, Calaveras, and Stanislaus. That's rare for many counties. We're richly blessed with our resources here. And as I mentioned, it's dominated by fractured rock, but we do have some significant alluvial groundwater basins. We prepared a watershed map that we have been using in various presentations. And the colors don't come across here very well, but that upper light blue-green area is the McCollum, the North Fork McCollum, middle and North Fork McCollum. The pink is the North and South Fork Calaveras. And then the strip down below is the North Fork Stanislaus. The green area you see in the southwest corner is an area, watershed area that's tributary to the Delta. It's not tributary to any of those 3 watersheds. It actually drains to the Delta, and because of that, we're somewhat intertied. And because of the proximity to the Delta, we're really tied to what's going on in the Delta. And then on the northeast down to the central portion, northwest down to the central portion of the county, is that eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin that pinches out into Valley Springs. So I just want to give everybody kind of an aerial overview of the watersheds. As far as the demographics goes, and this is important for our urban water management plan update because it requires us to really look at this. We use Department of Finance population projections and other sources of information, and according to that, there's a near doubling of the population. And I will say that in our planning, at least in the type of planning that I do, the long-range planning, we look out quite a ways because infrastructure takes time to build. Therefore, we look out 25, 30, 40 years. So we're already up, planning ahead to 2040 and beyond. And looking at the population projections, it's significant. Whether that's the exact number or not, we don't know, but we know it's significant. And I do want to point out that there are multiple wastewater districts throughout the county. I think we all know that. And in a couple of reports that I've been taking a look at, the valley spillover effects, as written about by Bill Fulton in Urban Development Futures in the San Joaquin Valley, really talks about the valley spillover effects by 2020, 30, 40, and so on, and how it's going to affect the rim of the valley, which is western Calaveras County. And then one point that's often overlooked and not included in proposed solutions is the aging population on fixed incomes and how increasing fees and rates are going to affect those individuals in our county. So now we're getting to the heart of my presentation here. This is a slide I've developed before, and I keep morphing it to some extent, but it's the intersection of water that determines the balancing act between the use of surface water and groundwater, and whether it's sustainable for the long-term future outlook of this county. If we're relying on a failing groundwater system now, to some extent it is, we don't know, we don't have enough information, and we're working with the United States Geologic Survey and others to really get a handle on how quickly it's failing, what is the long-term outlook. But if we know there are failing groundwater wells now and conditions worsen, what's our fallback plan for balancing the use of surface water and groundwater? What will be the future outlook for the prosperity and economic value of our communities in this county if we're dealing with failing wells and inadequate and unreliable water supply system? What about these valley spillover effects, increasing state and federal mandates, and how is that going to diminish our future water supplies? This intersection also determines what kind of water rates ratepayers are going to pay as a function of the type of infrastructure we have and our land use patterns that we develop. And throughout the next few slides, I'm going to break down each component of this intersection further and help foster the understanding and discussion necessary to partner on the proposed solutions to develop a long-term water management strategy that I think will help fit in implementation of the general plan. So let me start with land use. And I just picked this particular picture of the West County area randomly. There's really no purpose for that particular picture there. But it does show some development pattern that has caused some of the problems in this county. And that's that kind of over-reliance on groundwater and the underdevelopment of surface water. But as I mentioned, the general plan population projections are significant. The valley spillover effects are going to really affect the western edge of Calaveras County. And the current historic land use pattern resulting in rural residential sprawl has led to this over-reliance on groundwater without knowledge whether groundwater has sufficient supply or quality during normal years or prolonged droughts. We're going to have to look at these issues in our urban water management plan update. And much of this over-reliance on groundwater is outside of the county's control. I just want to point this out because it's a part of, at least the western side, is a part of the eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin, whereby eastern San Joaquin County ag has been over-pumping for decades. And therefore, there's not a whole lot we can do about it other than partnering with our downstream neighbors. So given the future uncertainty of surface water supply availability, it's clear to us that a coordinated water management plan among partnering agencies is necessary to protect the future economic well-being of the residents of this county. So I understand climate change is one of those complicated, controversial issues. I'm not going to get sidetracked by discussing climate change, but I will say that the climate has been changing forever and will continue to change forever. And I think that we need to plan for the next drought when it happens, not if, but when it happens. But what we do know is 87 through 92, a 6-year drought, is in the not so distant past. And we can expect that or something worse is going to occur in the future. We do know from tree ring studies and ice cores and things like that, there's droughts that are called super droughts that extend into 50 years. I don't know if that's around the corner, but I think it's incumbent on us as fiduciaries of this resource to plan for something that will happen maybe around the next corner. But the new predicted hydrology and meteorology is for greater extremes, wetter wets, drier dries, less snowpack, more rain, and when you have those types of meteorologic conditions, you're going to see greater evapotranspiration rates, and those are simply the ET rates that plants use to grow, and as they grow, they will diminish some of the available water supplies available to residents throughout the county and downstream. It basically means less runoff. Climate change is legislatively mandated to be addressed in sequence. It's mandated to be addressed in our urban water management plan, and we have to, as a result of this mandate, look at how we're going to meet a growing water demand during scarcer times of water availability. That's what this slide means. All the while, we are dealing with increasing legislative and regulatory mandates. If you're not aware, you're not reading the papers. Bottom line on this slide, costs are going up, expenses are going up, and because of this, it's ultimately going to affect all of our rates and property taxes. All the while, there's going to be less water availability and greater competition. That's the future outlook, and it looks pretty grim. The California legislature, as I mentioned previously, passed the Delta legislation in the fall of 2009. I just want to detail a couple of the legislative mandates contained within that suite of laws. There's increased in-stream flow studies right now, so it looks like possibly in-stream flow requirements are going to be going up. They've mandated water conservation practices through 20 by 2020, which statewide has to be reduced by 20%. Locally, what that means is we have to reduce our per capita water consumption. There's going to be costs associated with those types of reductions. They've also mandated groundwater management. There's increased water rights enforcement. And all of these together are putting a stress on the state's water management system, and realistically could result in reduced surface water rights because of the lack of development that we've seen in this county. If we're not using it, it's going to go elsewhere. That's the bottom line. And as I mentioned earlier, because of area of origin issues, it may not be there in the future. There's also for a county a model landscape ordinance that mandates new development, water conservation practices. And above all, this is grim but real. And what this also means is greater uncertainty in the reliability of this county's water supplies. Something that CCWD really wrestles with is infrastructure. You have to know that this is a rural area. As a result, the cost per unit is very expensive, and we just have a poor economy of scale. That's a simple, fundamental 101 message with infrastructure. It's not just water infrastructure, it's roads and everything else. We also we're blessed with topographic relief. It means we have rolling hills and changing elevations. What does that mean for water? It means we have to pump it uphill and then depressurize it going downhill to keep from blowing up everyone's plumbing. And that means extra cost to run these kinds of systems. And on top of that, we have to meet all the same regulatory requirements that metropolitan areas may have a greater economy of scale. As a result, we have a long list of deferred infrastructure needs with no money to pay for them. And I can tell you that they're probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's just CCWD. So I just want to summarize briefly before I start on the slide talking about proposed solutions. Some of these outstanding issues. Again, the imbalance between the use of surface water and groundwater, the failing wells. And as we look at these issues, I want to keep in mind that we have this large deferred infrastructure need. And I think the solutions we're going to propose are going to help us correct these outstanding issues. So, and this is going to be done through partnerships, by building teamwork, and through that we can exercise the due diligence, which simply is a legal term that means we're budgeting money, we're building infrastructure to put our available surface water rights to use, mitigate groundwater overdraft, manage them as a system, not as an individual source of water, and do that for both agriculture and existing and future urban development. So with that, it leads me to our plan for the future. And this is really the slide that I want to kick off the discussion and hear from everyone in the audience and the board. I can step through each of these, but I'm going to leave it to just a few brief statements, and then I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say. We spent quite a bit of money developing the water element a couple of years ago. It was a collaborative effort among a lot of parties, many of which are in this room today. But really the focus was, at least as CCWD wanted to be helped develop and funded the water element, was to focus growth in areas already served by infrastructure, to provide the economy of scale, the development of our surface water rights, and to help mitigate groundwater overdraft, to implement conjunctive use, all the things that I think we are going to need to develop a coordinated, proactive management plan for the county's water supplies. And I can tell you that while people sometimes I hear say, well, CCWD is big, the reality is we're small, and we're a small fish in the state's water supply arena. And the reality is there's no way we're going to be able to achieve these things only as CCWD. It's only going to be a partnership with the county's agencies, the private organizations, residents of this county and ag working together to make sure that some of these solutions are implemented. And the water element, I think, complements well with the agricultural element as well. I tracked that process and helped participated in it slightly. I didn't have enough time, but I know that I think it meshes with that ag element pretty well. And again, we're talking about focusing growth in areas already served by infrastructure. June mentioned integrated regional water management plans. I call them IRWMPs or IRWMPs. That's the future of all planning. But it's not just water. Well, water's in that word. It's really resource management from a watershed-based collaborative solution. And that's, I think, what we're talking about and emphasizing. And if we are successful at these measures, I think we'll have greater success at securing surface water supplies into the future for this county. Because right now they're at risk. I think also we'll be able to mitigate groundwater overdraft. We'll improve the economy of scale. Environmental stewardship has to be a part of the portfolio. Neighboring agencies, as I mentioned, will be a part of the collaborative effort. And we'll develop a public-private partnership that I think needs to exist for irrigated ag to be successful. And ultimately, I think it leads to a stronger state and federal advocacy program, because it's a competition for scarce. If you think water's scarce, money's even scarcer. So there's a lot of competition statewide and federally, and we need everyone's support and assistance. So with that, I think what I'd like to do is point out that there are available resources online with CCWD, the California Department of Water Resources, and California Department of Water Resources really for water management. I put up California Office of Planning and Research because they're head of the general plan. And I will say that it's not too distant in the future when the water elements are going to be mandated. There's this convergence between water and land use planning, such as water supply assessments, water elements, and so on. So I think it's good for us to be ahead of the curve. And with that, I'm open to questions. And I think our board and other staff may be available as well.
Thank you, that was very good. To any of the board? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Patterson, I agree with about 99.9% of the things that you said there, but there's some sort of dilemmas that I have struggled with a lot. You showed a slide earlier that showed the Little John portion of the water distribution system, that green area that was on the west side. Yes. I have personal knowledge of a number of wells that have been drilled out there that produce in excess of 400 gallons a minute. Now, with that specific knowledge, I don't know how much of a head of water is above it that's charging that, but I also know that Valley Springs has a system that is aside from the intertie that they have with CCWD as a backup, is entirely dependent upon groundwater for their water distribution. So it strikes me that there might be some wisdom in perfecting your surface water rights, as our initial go forward game plan for the county. But wouldn't it be prudent to also secure some high productive areas where groundwater is known to be, just to kind of hold it back in reserve for future droughts? Now, the one other point that I want to make on that is it's come to my attention that some of the water that is coming out of the groundwater has been through your radioisotope testing is proven that it's come from fairly long distances away over huge durations of time. I would think that in and of itself would sort of level out the impacts of periodic droughts. So I don't know, what's wrong with my logic that we perfect some fallback position with these high production wells, don't use them, but have them standing by for future use?
Well, as I mentioned in the presentation, there are places and where it is appropriate for groundwater use. I'm not going to say it's not, but I think that the record shows that there are many areas with failing wells, and that's during times when the hydrology, meteorology has been fairly abundant. Even though that was just a 2-3 year drought, the previous years we had 5-6 years of abundant water supplies. So I think that while there are areas that should have groundwater and should be on groundwater, there's other areas that shouldn't be. But what we don't know is, because of the lack of monitoring, is how reliable our systems are. And if wells are failing now, that doesn't bode well for the next, say, 6 to 10 year drought. But I do agree, and that's a part of the portfolio, is to have wells available to meet water supply needs in the future when, say, maybe we don't have the sufficient available surface water. And that gets into the point that I made about managing surface water and groundwater as a comprehensive resource. And the term often used for that is conjunctive use. So this is a complex area. There's no way we're going to answer it with this in this brief time, but I think that you make a good point, and I think it's a part of the portfolio. But I think we need to do better monitoring, and I think my point is still germane that there are a number of wells failing, and what are we going to do about it? And I keep coming back, our water rights, unless we're developing them, we have the reality is we will lose them.
And just I want to add real quick, we talked about regional planning efforts and conjunctive use planning, or just simply, like you said, not pumping the water. So in essence, you're recharging the basin, you're letting it heal. And we are involved in an integrated regional conjunctive use program. And that's just one facet that we're looking at to ensure that we better understand groundwater levels, and we're doing our part to make sure the groundwater supply is preserved. And if we can use surface water, well, in fact, we are healing the basin.
And preserving our rights.
Are there other questions or comments from the board? No, Steve, because I think
Go ahead. You can start and I'll go after.
water rights. And we've been talking about this for for years. And so what does that mean, especially when you say people, whoever people are talking about the highest and best beneficial use? Then it doesn't matter if we exercise our water rights. It isn't going to come to us anyway if the county of origin is changing.
Yeah, if I can just say one thing. When people talk about the area of origin not sort of standing the test in court, that hasn't happened. We have not exercised that legal ground. Those people that want water from us will tell you that area of origin probably isn't as strong, but we don't know that. And so we have to test it ourselves to make sure we protect the water rights that we do have. And what Ed talks about is metropolitan areas that are leveraging a lot of dollars and efforts to get water from the source, which is where we're located. They're trying everything to get water. What we have to do is figure out the beneficial use, consumptive use, to show that there is demand, that we are going to use this water. And if we can show in the next 20 years that we are going to use these water, or the majority of it, the State Water Resource Control Board will not just simply take that away from us, but we have to demonstrate that we have a good plan and be able to show in the next 20 years, there's a really good chance that we are going to, in fact, use all the rights that are permitted to us. If we cannot show that, they will start to look at the water as this big pot that's available to the state and saying, who needs water? Because you're not using it over here. We're going to take some from you and give it to those that need more. And what Ed keeps emphasizing, as well as CCWD, is that today we may not use all that water. But 20, 30 years from now, we don't want to take away the option of whether it's development or whatever demand there may be. We don't want to take that option off the table. So we're trying to plan out for future generations so they can make their decision as to what kind of water usage that they have.
I understand that, and this isn't a water rights meeting. But we've been talking about this in this county and all the mountain counties that are pretty much counties of origin. We've been saying the same message for over 20 years. And nothing seems to be moving forward, not just on behalf of Calaveras, but on behalf of all the mountain counties that are involved in counties of origin. And so, I mean, I sort of feel like if we're going to be in this process, then whether it's part of the general plan or in terms of partnership, as Ed talked about earlier, then we need to do something. And we haven't. In the last 20 years, we haven't really moved forward, and we keep talking about projecting into the future and future generations and future growth. And then I hear Ed talking about, and we know that the downstream users want the water. I mean, again, it's a topic in and of itself. It's just that it's now a double message.
Well, I understand your points, and they're good. I've seen it. But I don't want to look backwards. I really want to look forward. There's been, preserve and protect water rights is in our mission statement. It's in the general plan policies. It's all over the place, and they're meaningless words unless something is actually being done.
Correct.
And it's been a lot of talk, but I want to look forward. I want to put that behind us because as I was drafting the outline in this presentation and the fact that I'm representing CCWD in these groundwater studies, filing the surface water rights, I attend forums around the state and the nation. It keeps coming back to me that, as I get calls from people crying on the phone about their failed well and how they've sunk 2 and 3 well bores trying to get a water supply only to spend $30,000, $40,000 and come up dry, and those are isolated, I admit, so don't want to go too far with that picture, but the simple reality is this. I know groundwater is not as reliable as people think it is, and that's fractured rock to the West County area. Meanwhile, it's a question of cost and a question of partnering. How successful can we be in the future? Not looking at the basketball, but in the future, partnering among all of our agencies to reduce that economy of scale, that per unit cost, so that we can get people off some of these failing wells. We don't have to get everybody off of a failing well because, as I mentioned, some wells are appropriate in some areas. But as Jude mentioned, when we get some of ag off of failing well groundwater, when we get some of the urban areas off of failing groundwater, it relieves the stress that on that system and puts our surface water rights beneficial use. So when the next drought comes around, and there will be one, you'll be starting at a higher groundwater elevation than you would otherwise. And so you have some protective measures, you have some mitigation. We're developing our surface water rights. And I think the only way we're going to be able to do that is having these informed discussions and putting differences aside, working collectively to develop a vision, a comprehensive plan for surface and groundwater use, monitoring, and taking that plan to Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and putting this into place.
And it's not just going to be all talk anymore. And I understand your frustration. I've only been here 6 months, and I'm frustrated too. So we are going to start taking some actions to follow up on the very things that we talked about and working with everybody.
Steve, you have a question or comment?
A couple of comments. One of the things I know for sure is that the counties of origin Sierra provides about 2/3 of the state's water supply. Most of the state thinks their water comes from the valley. And the statistics run roughly that the counties of origin or the areas of origin have less than 3% of the population, while the downstream users comprise the other 97%. What that requires, I think, is that the 3% be well organized. And you've talked a lot about, I heard you say that partnerships were lacking. If you take a look at the structure of water delivery and the people who should be planning for water availability and infrastructure are divided in this county, just those providing water, into multiple agencies providing less than 25,000 hookups. To me, the economy of scale that you're talking about is also related to our level of organization as a set of communities. And the political fact of life is that the 97% will have their way with us on any given day, unless we're well organized, have established our legal rights, but are at least speaking with one voice and with the capacity to plan and develop our own infrastructures here locally in the counties of origin. I'm curious about when you say partnerships are lacking, and of course one of them is between land use agencies and water agencies, but the other is between our own water agencies and what's going on. But I'd be curious about what measures you would think could be taken, other than the ones we're already engaged in, that might expedite the kind of unity that our own survival is dependent upon.
And I'm happy to say, in talking with the surrounding water agencies, and I've not talked to all of them, but everybody's in agreement. The past is the past, but we have so many challenges ahead of us. There's no way we can continue to look at egos and tendency to be territorial. That will ensure failure on our part. So the past history needs to stay in the past, and as we look at what we have at stake here, for the members of our community, because we all are responsible for making sure that we have water supply for the members of our community. We have the same goal and objective. We do things a little differently, but the end goal is the same, and we recognize it. And so far, the response from these agencies, to me, has been encouraging, because at least people are willing to talk and sit at the table, and that is really the best step that you can take. And again, when we talk about regional advocacy, it has to be as a group. It may not include everyone. Not everyone may want to participate, but if you can get a good majority, and I think the potential is definitely there, and that's one of the things that we will be exploring very deeply next year, is to start reaching out to a variety of stakeholders that impact water and land use, and try to work together and at least have a conversation to start saying, we do need to work together. We need to put the past issues, if there are any, aside, because we can't afford to play anymore. It's serious time, and we have a lot at stake, and we don't have a lot of time.
What, if any?
The implementation of the water element and the integrated regional water management plan brings in the opportunity for the conversation to develop internally within the county that will then be a portfolio of goals, objectives, and projects that we can then turn externally to help achieve what we're talking about here.
What, if anything, would you suggest as the county's role? What can we do to help further that process? And are there any things that you would suggest to us that steps we could take toward that end?
Well, absolutely. We have taken you upon, and we will continue to do so. One of the things that have worked well in a region that I've had a chance to work at is you can have a lot of small communities, you can have a lot of small agencies, but you become essentially a regional caucus. You create a forum, and that's one of the things that we will be doing next year, is to create a forum. Those that want to come and participate, we encourage them. Those that want to partner, we encourage that. We're going to start talking about issues like water rights and area of origin, and we're going to get better informed, and we're going to lay out all of our issues on the table so that we could tread through this and come up with a unified position that we can take to either Sacramento or to DC and start doing something. Let's try. It may not work, but we're never going to know if we don't try things. And so we have to become a caucus within this region to be able to advocate for the things that matter to our community. So when we are prepared, when we get into that planning process, we will definitely reach out to you and your staff and anyone that's interested in working with us, and let's create this together to look at the issues that matter to all of us.
And one thing I would make a request, and I've made the request before, on these IRWPs, as we meet as a caucus internally within this county that will report to these IRWPs. There are two that I mentioned in the past, the MAC and the informally stencils to the south. I really ask the board, considering the staff and already the scarcity of staff, is to have at least one county staff member, maybe from the planning department or wherever, attend some of those meetings, so that when those conversations take place about land use, water, watersheds, that expertise from the county's perspective is a part of that caucus and that integrated approach.
And you think that might be the nexus for land use and water to come together, so you're looking at planning personnel already stretched rather thin, but I understand the need. I have a couple other questions. There have been recent studies that are showing that the condition of alpine meadows and the forests have some considerable relationship between both water quantity and the release of water from the Sierra, as well as the quality of it. And I'm curious about how you see that relationship.
I agree with you. I have a place up in the Feather River system, and meadows frequently have been disturbed, and there's a number of projects that are restoring the meadows, and actually they're seeing more water storage potential. Meadows act much like a snowpack does. There's even water transfers out of meadows now, which is somewhat controversial because you got to meter it and so forth and valve it. But as far as alpine meadows goes and restoration of meadows within this county, I think the perfect opportunity for that element of our overall water management portfolio, again, is back to the IRWMP, and either the county or some constituent needs to stand up and make that their cause as we look at the overarching management objectives we're trying to achieve, and that's a good one. It's noteworthy, but we need someone to stand up on that specific element.
Finally, you mentioned that wells are failing, and I certainly know that anecdotally. Is there any central location of information about how many wells in Calaveras and where they are failing and why?
I wish I had a good, clean answer for you. I know that we have about 40 or 50 residents in the county on a customer service list in which they pay a flat fee or a key in exchange for a key that opens a lock at 2 of our water treatment plants on the west side.
Is that the picture that you
Yes,
showed people picking it up in their trucks?
At times, there's a line at those because it takes a while to fill those tanks, and I hear some people are making that trip 2-3 times a week. So much of their week is spent just getting a water supply for basic needs at their residence. Now, I've thought about this, and I want to, because I'd like to know that number too. And the reality is, I think that's a subset of the number of failing wells in this county. I think other people truck water from other sources or contract with water tanker trucks or have some other alternative means. And this gets back to partnering, and I know that I've worked with Brian Moss with the Environmental Health Department, who has a pretty good GIS database, and in some of the work that we're doing on groundwater management, we're trying to get more data to populate Brian's database. And I think this is a future, June talked about next year how we're going to roll out different programs and collaborative efforts. Groundwater management and improving our overall understanding is another area. I actually have been working with a researcher and a consultant out of Sacramento too that is interested in fractured rock groundwater supply. And we have a scope of work written that we're hoping to submit a grant application so that we can do a $500,000 study in Amador and Calaveras counties about the carrying capacity of fractured rock as it relates to land use planning and so on. I don't know if that's going to be successful. It's probably news to some of our board members, but I think it's pretty exciting because I am hearing about wells that are failing in the upcountry system, and I don't think we have enough information. So that's one other area that I think would help our, groundwater.
I'd also like to see some mapping of how many wells, and I know this is happening all over the place, are being deepened to catch up with water, both in the fissures but also in the aquifer. And I won't belabor the point, but it'd be really nice to see where this is happening and what we can learn from the underlying geology as it pertains to land use. How many straws can go into a particular place actually matters to the well-being of the people who are going to be moving and living there.
Well, we need that knowledge base and mapping tools so that we can help pull that into our water management portfolio that includes surface water. And without that information, we're we're researching. We're blind. So I think that's an important element to what we're proposing here.
Well, I'm sorry we only have an hour and now a little to do this, because the issue really should take the better part of an afternoon. There are deep implications for what you've suggested for us to put into our planning process and think of how we can put this into action through our general plan. But given the crowd outside, I guess I'll end my questioning at this point.
Does the public have any questions or comments that they would like to make, questions to ask? And we're just going to take all the questions and then do them at the end. Okay, thank you.
Joe Kelly. I'm concerned, as everyone here is, or they wouldn't be here, about water. Something I've seen throughout the state, I've been kind of following it in different areas, is that there's nearly 24 groundwater basins around the state are under adjudication. And the inherent conflict between agriculture, population growth, and housing, which is referred to as an impending train wreck. But I also am very interested in this fall of 2009, and this thing states that it's up to these agencies are going to be looked at to assume the responsibility of well monitoring. Now I would assume that it would be their wells for the rise and flow of the water, and not volumetric, but a rise and flow. And if they don't, then DWR is going to come in and do it. And then my understanding is they will lose an ability to go after funding because of it until certain things happen. Also, this numerical limits and testing are solely on urban per capita use. So the private wells are out of the picture. Agriculture is out of the picture. Although there are some things for agriculture to be looked at as the different types of water get away from the flood irrigation to use an overhead for a certain crop, and the most expensive being the help me out here, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, there's drip irrigation.
Drip irrigation, thank you. So getting into an efficient water management practices and agricultural water management practices. I won't go back through this thing, but these are concerns of mine. And so how is it going to affect? Water rights are pretty well established, so we won't get into that. But how is this going to affect to pull this stuff in, and how is it going to affect a general plan when you have certain elements left out of it? And I do believe, and although I have given a lot of pain to the Ag Coalition, I do believe agriculture is a primary function that we need to have around here for a long time. And if we need to cut housing, then we need to cut housing. Population can slow. I've seen it throughout the state. As you have under the last stormwater pollution prevention stuff, is you had a 2.5. Other counties went to a 2.3 and managed through. But now they're looking at restricting, which you can do, I believe, restricting the amount of people or development that can stick their straw into the ground to suck the water out. You do have that ability, but I don't think otherwise, in some respects, you have the right to touch agriculture or those with the private wells, unless the laws come around and change, and then we will see probably some pretty heavy and hairy legal conditions going on. The subject of this fall of 2009 also was that water bond thing, which got thrown out. A number of things were there. The environmentalists looked at it as, well, we want those that are going to benefit from it to pay for it. Okay, I can understand that. And the other issue was, private enterprise coming into as a partnership into this thing, and that actually the government's water agency facilities would then be privatized. And that was a big concern from my understanding of reading up on this fall 2009 thing, and that's also another reason why it kind of got kicked to the side. And I think that's pretty much it. What I would like to know is a primary question, if they haven't kind of gotten my gist, is are they going to do that well monitoring, and are they going to look for volunteer monitoring, say on higher capacity wells or something of that sort, if somebody wants to do it? I'm not advocating mandatory, but if somebody wants to volunteer that, to be able to get an idea what's happening within here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair, Honorable Supervisors, I'm Al Segala, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. And wow, we got a really complex thing going on here. It's hard for my little brain to kind of grab a hold of it. One of the things that is clear and perhaps mentioned at the very beginning is there's sort of a collectivistic approach to this, collaborative or maybe a more socialistic way of trying to create what would happen in the community using the regulatory process, which is government. And government uses police power, and that's where its authority rests. So I think the taxpayers and the property owners are concerned that much of this is very good, but that the line not be crossed where property rights start to become a victim or eliminated. For a particular question, it seems like the water comes from the sky, goes on the ground, and then goes over the ground and in the ground and then ends up in the valley. And there seems to be two types of property rights involved. One is the water rights of the landowner to the water that's under his property. And that's where the wells come in. And the other one is the county of origin water rights, which seems to pertain to the political entity, and or between different political entities wanting to have access to water. In the case of the property owner, let's assume just for a second that the responsibility for water on a property is the property owner's responsibility. If they need to put a tank, they pay for the tank. They put a well, they buy water from somebody else or a neighbor or whatever. In other words, it's as long as they have a right to own that property, responsibility for that water is theirs. When you go from that basic, you move away from the collectivistic approach somewhat, because then the question comes up, well, how can that person recharge its own battery, its own subterranean water reserve? And then the next question comes in, what about leach fields? We do know they work. They certainly work for septic systems. What is the relationship between how many feet of leach field do you need to have that would be equal to a certain amount of water that could be extracted? I don't think that question's even been raised. However, if property owners can recharge their own batteries, so to speak, a lot of the problem starts to disappear. True, we will have less surface runoff because it'll be going into leach fields for the people down the valley, but then again, they're responsible for their own water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segale.
Good afternoon. John Buckley, Director of the Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center. Thanks to Ed and CCWD for putting on a very well-organized presentation. Or just for a moment, before I share some brief comments, point to the left side there in the plan for the future. Implementing the water element, encouraging new growth to connect to existing infrastructure, developing and implementing the IRWIMPs, there's two of them that tie to this county, securing surface water resources for the county, and mitigating groundwater overdraft are all five essential, basic, they are just no-brainer steps that this board will want to embrace in collaboration with not just CCWD, with other water districts and interests in the county. And it's great that we have the resource that Ed and others provided today. Just to make sure that you're aware of the conservation community as a resource, very briefly, I'm not only involved in the Stanislaus-Tuolumne, or Tuolumne-Stanislaus-Erwimp with Ed and with others, but I'm involved in the Sierra Water Work Group. I sit this year on a State Water Board Stakeholders Committee up in Sacramento, where I've been going once a month with everyone from the Farm Bureau to the timber industry to developers and others on that. I'm sitting on a septic advisory committee over in Tuolumne County, and I'm involved in Environmental Water Caucus, as well as being involved in almost all the water issues in this local region for the last 20 years. The reason I throw this out is you've had a tremendous amount of positive information, but a lot of times it's easy to just be overwhelmed, especially like Marita's questions about water rights, and to think, well, what can we do with all of this? And I think there's some simple, basic points that were included in this, but I just expand on really briefly. The first is in your upcoming general plan, you have implementing the water element. You also have the ability tied to that to look at your land planning policies and project approvals and think how they affect water. It's that integrated planning that's been referred to, but integrated planning is a nice big nebulous word. What can you specifically do? The first is despite the fact that some wells are going to boom in the worst drought conditions, and they're going to be there just as you pointed out, nobody's debating that. But as a general reality, in drought conditions or extended dry periods, and in FERC relicensing, we refer to them as critical dry years. In critical dry years that are the ones that are the exceptions to the rule, if you don't have water, people cannot live at that place. If there's not water, agriculture cannot produce a crop. So the challenge is not to manage or not to have even policies that plan for the normal or the wet years or even the dry years, but to plan for critical dry circumstances. And based on that, when someone comes before you in a wet year and wants a subdivision that's going to rely on 8 wells over 40 acres, 5 acres, or whatever it might be, think about the straws in the ground and the long term. Will those wells be guaranteed? And I've heard members of this board and the Planning Commission say it's not our position to guarantee them, but will those wells be guaranteed in critical dry years? The second is allocations of water, and I was talking with Bob before this session started. Just an example, Oak Canyon Ranch, it's approved. Nobody's here to debate the merits or not the merits of Oak Canyon Ranch and the huge number of homes there. But moving beyond the homes, those of you that are on the board then remember that there are 2 big lake reservoirs. One of them is being created now in the Copperopolis general area in very hot, dry summer conditions, a lake that will have an island created in the middle of it, the lake, for the fanciest homes to be out there in a circular fashion on an island in the middle of the lake as part of the overall process. And if you just think of the water that's in there and think about that water being available for agriculture or that water being available for something else, thinking about the design of projects and thinking about how they can be most effective. Ed pointed out that there is competition for scarce water supplies, and he also mentioned that there's the 20% conservation mandate target that the state has set out there. With a lot of things, when they're set out years in the future, who knows whether they'll actually be required. But based on all of the water interests that I'm involved in, that our center's involved in, it appears that not only is that likely to be adhered to, but that counties or utility districts or others that do not show progress toward reducing water waste and make progress toward water efficiencies are going to be penalized. There will not be the dollars available for infrastructure or other things that would be desired. So another opportunity through the general plan update is for the county to prioritize that projects that are going to be allocated for water not only use water in the most efficient way as possible, but that even where possible, the existing projects or existing development is tied in for ways to increase water conservation. Ed mentioned climate change. I'm not going to get into any debate over climate change because no one has a guaranteed outlook on the future of weather. Can't predict 2 weeks from now. To claim that anybody knows the predictions for the future is simply predictions. But I'm involved in two processes. One is over in Yosemite Park where they're staff scientists related to wildlife, where we're doing surveys right now. And just in the last few months, the scientists completed doing a data analysis back from, I think it's 70 years ago, of where wildlife and plants were at that time compared to now. And there's already been a significant shift, a movement upward of, it's at least for most species, 1,000 feet in elevation, and some species more than 2,000 feet in elevation as plants are shifting upward because there's a warming trend. The other and much more important information is UC Davis has compiled all the models, prediction models, based on trends, not on what somebody's predicting for the future, based on trends over the last 30 years. And the trends show that there's a warming and drying with less snowpack and less water availability in the Sierra Nevada. And that comes back to, how does that affect the county? And then how do you take those potential effects and look at them in the water element in the general plan? And I would just go to one that is, I think, close to the hearts of most people in this county, which is agriculture. Agriculture is one of the rural bases of the county. It's good for open space. It's good for tourism. It's good for wildlife and the values that I'm concerned about. And it's also good for the rural character of the county. The county has the opportunity in the general plan to prioritize allocating water for not just today's ag water demands, but to look for realistic expansion into the future. And given the county and CCWD cannot guarantee beyond existing water rights that we will have that best and highest use, the challenge is with the existing water that is assured, how can the county allocate or have policies that, working with CCWD and other entities, will provide for that expansion of agriculture. So in closing, I would just emphasize that CCD's presentation today was just excellent. It's certainly going to continue to work as a utility district on what it sees as its best interest. But the challenge for this board is you guys have so many things on your plates, so many demands on your time. How realistic is it that you're going to prioritize all the things that you would like to do with water unless you somehow use the opportunity, the general plan update, to do three things: to protect water quality, to steer water quality use toward effective conservation, and to require surface water for new development and new projects to the extent possible, so that you are moving in a direction that is most realistic and efficient into the future. So thank you, and again, I appreciated Ed's presentation, and well done.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Are there any questions or comments?
I really enjoy a love fest between governmental agencies. I really want to compliment you. I really enjoy it. I noticed the gentleman before me mentioned that he didn't want to bring the environmental issue in, but he dropped a couple of hints. So on those bases, and I think will have an implication on some other issues that you have, I want to bring you I'm just going to give it to you so that I don't waste you too much time. There's a gentleman by the name of Hal Lewis. He is from University of California, Santa Barbara. He resigned recently, hasn't been reported too much, and I want to give you a copy of it and his reference to some of these things. And I would like to, maybe you can pay 25 cents and have a copy of copies for people. So it's going to be available to you. Another point, I hear an awful lot of talk about what's connection and communication between organizations, but somehow nobody talks about the ratepayers, the constituents. I'd like to hear you gloat about what kind of outreach you did to the constituents over there. What kind of hearings did you had? I mean, they are the final say-so in this whole thing, and what kind of relationship you folks want to forge with other agencies. So keep it in mind. Election's coming. Another point, double the population. Where are you guys getting it? I mean, I know you're very good about aquifer, but you don't have authority on how this county is going to double in population. Where are you getting this? Okay. Next thing. Well, protecting water. Can you identify the aquifer in this county? I mean, I can understand the straw business, but can you identify if that straw goes down another 100 feet, it's going to change? Can you map me the aquifer in this county? Do you have any idea? I mean, the feds can do it, but maybe the highly educated people on your district can identify it. You don't know what the hell is under the ground. I mean, you can guess. You can guess and base it on premises, but you don't really know what's in the aquifer. I mean, I know it's to perpetuate job security for some of these people, but what you're proposing is infrastructure to be put in. Do you really think you're going to get a grant for it in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? I mean, it's great for securing jobs for yourself, but folks, let's get the real. You're not going to get it from the feds. You're not going to get it from the state, and I really doubt it you're going to get it from your constituents. So those are some of the reality checks that hopefully you can take a look at. But, well, let's just leave it with that, because there's some more stuff in here that when a more appropriate time is going to come in. But I really thank you for your work, and I do really like to see the water issue settled, because I do live here and I plan to live here. And little minor details like, isn't New Hogan a federal issue? Isn't Calaveras River a federal issue? I mean, how are you going to tap into those supplies? How is it going to affect? I mean, there's runoff going into New Hogan, right? I believe. I mean, you can answer it. But, and the water is taken out of New Hogan. Do you have any control over it? So, anyway, folks, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Is there anyone else? I'm trying to be respectful. We have another very passionate group coming in next.
Muriel Zeller, Valley Springs. I just have a couple of quick questions. Mr. Pattison mentioned that a lack of development in Calaveras County is threatening CCWD's water rights. I was just wondering how much development is required to secure the water rights, and where do they anticipate the bulk of it will occur? And will surface water be used to recharge groundwater? And if so, does this mean CCWD will support groundwater regulation? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Infacino, and I'm presenting these comments on behalf of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. First, the coalition applauds CCWD for not only looking at the many challenges in the water world of our future, but also for presenting to this board 6 points of constructive guidance to make most of the opportunities our water future presents to us. I like to see people not only bringing problems to your board, but also bringing the solutions with them. So I thank you for CCWD for doing that. There's 4 points I do want to cover because I think they're worth repeating. One of the items discussed was the land use and population projections associated with the general plan. If you really want a general plan that will help your water providers defend their appropriations, your general plan will include both accurate growth estimates and the capital programs to ensure that that growth can be accommodated by infrastructure and services. One without the other isn't going to work. Second, there was also a solution noted by CCWD to maximize the use of existing infrastructure. The community-centered growth pattern that's reflected in most of your preferred alternative map will maximize the use of existing infrastructure and also reduce the competition for capital resources. It gets existing users and future users pulling in the same direction on infrastructure development, and that's a good thing. Third, and I think this is the most important procedural item that CCWD mentioned, and that was coordinate with neighbors. Let's not make the same mistake that East Bay Mud made. Let's not, when they plan to dam a river without asking the people who live there. As you may recall, they formed a stakeholders group and then didn't invite anybody from Calaveras or Amador to discuss building a dam at Pardee. So I think we can do a lot better than that. And toward that end, I think we can encourage Calaveras County and the water management entities working to update the IRWMPs to include broad representation in the interested stakeholders. Finally, there's something I want to clarify, and give me a little time to do it because I think it'll help a lot.
Tom, we don't really have a lot of time if you have.
Well, I just want to give an example because we hear a lot about this, use it or lose it. And I think some people think that means, well, that's simple. You just build a dam and you get some more water and that's how you use it or lose it. Actually, and that was the 1870s solution to the problem. But now we have a much broader scope of opportunities to do the same thing. And let me explain how. Basically, the way the state water code works now, whether you develop raw water, recycled water, whether you conserve water, or you do conjunctive use, you get credit for developing that water the same. So if, for example, you had an appropriation for 20,000 acre-feet of water, and your permit said that, well, you got to put that to use in 20 years, and you're in year 15 and you've only used the first 15,000 acre-feet, what do you do to develop that last 5,000 acre-feet? Well, you could, try and build a dam and draw the water out and find somebody who will buy it for agricultural or residential use. Or, if it's cheaper or easier or quicker, you could take 5,000 acre-feet of wastewater and use it for irrigation. Or, if it's cheaper or quicker or easier, you could pay your customers to put in drip irrigation systems and save 5,000 acre-feet of water and get credit for that. Or, if you have a groundwater problem and you're trying to recharge, you have some way to recharge the aquifer, you could use that 5,000, you could recharge that groundwater, and if those people are using 5,000 acre-feet a year, you get credit for that. So, and by the way, and I want Al to listen to this part, you know that 5,000 acre-feet of water that you haven't developed yet? If you've used one of those other methods, you get to sell that to somebody else. So if there's someone who wants to buy it. So there's a potential for getting revenue back and maybe keeping rates a little bit lower. Somebody was talking about that back there earlier. So, and finally, what you end up doing is when you make your next appropriation request, you go to the Water Board showing that you've met in the past the Water Code 1257 requirements to both use water and put it to a beneficial use up front and reuse and reclaim that water. Because under California water law, we recognize that California water is so nice, we want you to use it twice. So with that, I just want to, again, thank CCWD for bringing us some solutions. And I want you to recognize that while there are a lot of challenges in our water future, there are also a lot of opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casino. I'll take one more question because we have another study session and they still have questions to answer.
Hello, I'll keep this brief. I'm Tanya Dowson from Burson. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak. I have concerns about the water element and its effect on property rights. And perhaps the CCWD has its own interest in mind, and they appear to be making no provisions to protect individual rights. When the CCWD talks about land use, to quote from the board packet, the current and historic land use pattern resulting in rural residential sprawl has led to reliance on failing groundwater systems without knowledge whether groundwater system has sufficient supply or quality during normal years or prolonged droughts. First of all, belittling people's homes as sprawl shows the bias CCWD has against private land use decisions. Secondly, they apparently really don't know much about our groundwater. They argue that the lack of, quote, without knowledge whether groundwater system has sufficient supply or quality during normal years or prolonged droughts, unquote, is a valid reason to limit groundwater use. Ignorance is not a valid reason to limit individual rights. Who is to say the failed wells haven't failed because of a drought 300 years ago? They don't know. When the CCWD talks about climate change, the fact of a warming Earth caused by man is junk science. Since the debacle in Copenhagen, real science has clearly shown that man's effect on global climate is negligible. The Earth is going to do whatever it's going to do. A warming Earth of its own accord is currently as predictable as the weather. Forcing land use based on climate change is simply a pretext for centrally controlled land use, also known as socialism. When the CCWD talks about legislative, state mandates are also headed towards centrally controlled land use. In some cases, if Calaveras County does not take state money, we don't have to comply. Still, regardless of state groundwater management laws, we implore our local government not to follow in lot goose step. When the CCWD complains about lack of infrastructure, these issues are simply whining. Of course, there is economy of scale in urbanizing water usage. The CCWD needs more subscribers per mile to help pay for requirements. Hence, their demand for the urbanization of the county at the expense of land use rights. When the CCWD talks about outstanding issues, the CCWD wants to, and I quote, correct groundwater overdraft and failing wells, unquote. The first and most importantly, where is the proof that failing wells are caused by overdraft? It has already been demonstrated that the CCWD has no knowledge of the groundwater, so claiming overdraft is simply a smokescreen to take property rights, land use rights, or unalienable rights. When the CCWD talks about plans, on point number 1 in the Board of Supervisors board packet, of course the CCWD wants to urbanize us serfs. It's in their best interest. On point number 4 in the Board of Supervisor packet, they wish to share groundwater data. Have they already assumed that they have groundwater rights? On point number 6 in the Board of Supervisor packet, they wish to, and I quote, develop integrated approach both locally and regionally to meet new and emerging political, legislative, and regulatory actions that impact Calaveras County water before they become law, unquote. The Board of Supervisors needs to instruct the CCWD and the staff to find ways to protect individual rights and lobby against political, legislative, and regulatory actions that infringe on individual rights. In conclusion, please see the CCWD's request as self-serving. Please stop the headlong rush toward the urbanization of the county, both in the water element and in the land use element. I am well aware that what I am asking will take strong leadership. There are those who love the nanny state and will demand that the nanny take care of some to subsidize others, or take from some to subsidize others. When it comes to water, individual responsibility is the best way towards freedom. Thank you.
I'm going to have to cut off any further questions or comments. Doesn't mean that we can't accept any. They can go to Brenda in the planning department, and she can be our conduit to CCWD. And I'm going to ask you to try and respond to some of the questions, and I am going to ask you to keep it under 8 minutes.
I can be very, very quick. There were some very good comments. I'm going to go in order. I did take some notes. If I miss, I apologize. It's my notes. The first question or statement that I really pulled out of the statement was well monitoring. And, because CCWD is involved in groundwater management by virtue of the adoption of the groundwater management plan, it is a voluntary program. We're not going to be monitoring any wells that the private property owner does not want monitored. We have installed two monitoring wells that are very scientifically based, and that's going to be a cornerstone of our monitoring program, but we do monitor some other wells in the area that are privately owned, and those people are happy that we're monitoring them because we provide them information. That addresses.
Are these both in the fissure And the aquifer?
We haven't been monitoring the fractured rock wells.
Okay.
We have been only monitoring wells within the boundaries established by the groundwater management plan.
All right.
There is some discussion about that, and I think that, as Jim mentioned, next year we'll probably tackle some of that discussion. But I want people to know this is voluntary. You can participate if you want to. If you don't, that's fine too. There's no worry about the state coming in and trying to take something away. I think Al Segala made a statement about the line between private property rights don't violate overriding landowners' rights to groundwater. I don't think there's any worry there. As I mentioned, we're trying to study and make some, create enough education that together we can try to better manage the system. And the last speaker spoke about the individual's best way to go. Well, that's great if you're, and I'm jumping around, that's great if you live in an area where no one lives, but the reality is a lot of people live in this area and we're impacting one another. And I think that I've gotten enough calls from people with wells that have failed that they've deepened them, they've done everything they can. Does that mean that we don't do anything to help those individuals out? I mean, there's got to be a balance. I think we need to protect private property rights, but between that and not doing anything for anyone that has a failed well system, I think we're looking for that, the community-based balance point here. So I want people to be assured, and Jim can step in here because this is a sensitive area, that we really are trying to do what's best for everybody without stepping on any toes. And we're going to do it in an open, transparent way, taking into account everybody's comments.
And we're not here to take a position on property rights. You know, our job is if you need water, we want to make sure you get it and that you continuously get it and it's the highest quality. That is really our driving motivation for all of this policies and any topic that does come up. And so whether it's growth or no growth, we're not advocating one way or the other. But if there is going to be water demand and need for water, here's what we think makes the most sense, looking at the economy of scale, looking at the preservation of future water rights, what makes the best sense for this community for today and for years to come. Again, when we do planning, we have to look at near-term and long-term solutions. And there is a lot that we don't know about water. And you talk to anybody in the state, there's a lot to be learned. As much as we know today, there's so much more to be learned because of new challenges. And we're all working towards that. So we don't have all the answers. And I'll be the first one to tell you, we don't know everything. And anyone that tells you that they know everything is lying to you. So we are working and we are doing our best to get ourselves better informed. Talk about what kind of proof for the dwindling groundwater supply. Well, we just went through a community, 56 property owners with failing wells, and throughout the state, overdraft is a very common issue. Some areas in coastal areas, the overdraft causes saltwater intrusion, seawater intrusion. So as far as when you look at the science, there is enough information and studies to support that, you know, it makes sense when you pull out water and you don't put it back in, or you don't put as much as you pull out, there's going to be problems. And again, this is something that all areas throughout the state has experienced. And as far as what we're doing for ratepayer outreach, and I'm really glad that was brought up because you can't do enough outreach. And especially when you're trying to tell people, use less and pay more, and this is a very tough message, to tell people that with this economy, the water cost is going to rise. You are not the popular person in the room, but we are going to be absolutely honest and upfront so that we have a clear communication. We welcome ideas. We're doing our very best to scramble to mitigate the cost of water from rising. We're looking at other sources of funds. We're looking at state funds. We are looking at federal funds. With the economy of today, no water agency can do it all by themselves. Otherwise, you are going to put the entire financial burden on your ratepayers. And so state funds, federal funds, we can't do business without those resources. So, I mean, I hope that we touched hopefully all the questions, and certainly we'll be here afterwards. I have my card if anybody wants to, have further conversations about any of this, but we will do extensive outreach. We want to hear from you. We want to answer to you. You are our stakeholders. Everyone in this county we see as our stakeholders. So we want to invite that. We want to encourage that. So make no mistake, as far as outreach is concerned, you will definitely have those opportunities.
If I may, there was a couple other questions, and I can finish up real quick. I think Mario Zeller asked about development of surface water rights and how much development would it take to secure those rights. That wasn't the use of development as a term that I think she misunderstood. In the development I was talking about was just the general sense of developing surface water rights. I see the surface water rights being used by not only urban development, the future population that will come to this county. And I think there's some question that why did we use Department of Finance population projections? I think they are high, but I think the simple reality is people are coming to this county and they're going to need water. And as June pointed out, we've got to supply them that water. How do we do it in an affordable, cost-effective manner? But it's not only going to be just urban. We have agriculture in this county. I think John Buckley stated it very well that ag is one of the best so-called industries that this county has because it meets all the goals and objectives that I think we can all agree on. That much of ag it's difficult to get them surface water. And I think that, again, through partnerships, we can make that happen in a cost-effective manner. And we keep having this discussion about the individual versus somehow a collective partnership is equal or taken to socialism. And I don't see it. I think two minds are always better than one. I don't care where you come from or what political philosophy you have. We're not advocating any socialism program here. We're talking about rolling our sleeves up, working together, and doing what is good for the individual and for the farmer and for our communities that I think we can all agree on. And if this population that comes to this county over the next 20 years is able to sprawl, and I didn't mean to provide a negative connotation sprawl, it has its appropriate place, just like groundwater does. But if we allow everyone that comes to this county over the next 30 years to have 5, 10s, and 20s, all on wells and septics, I guarantee you there's going to be a huge increase in well failures and all the other negative attributes that type of land use pattern can bring. And it has value, and I'm not trying to make it sound negative, and I think I am, but I think if we all live that way, there are problems. I think we can all agree to that. So I apologize if I made it sound like there's somehow a negative connotation with it. It's just that we need to keep in mind that there is going to be future population, and we have to have a planned approach to how we develop and use water and infrastructure. And that's all we're trying to do, and do it in a way that I think protects the individual and everyone here at the table.
And she had one other question. Will surface water be used to recharge groundwater? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. This is an information-only session. There'll be a lot more to come as we start getting into the general plan. On behalf of the board, thank you so very much. I know this is a very passionate topic for those of you in the room. It is also for me. And the study session before was on water and the general plan, also a very passionate topic. So if anybody has anything they'd like to discuss that's not passionate, the board would like to hear from you. The study session before us is the Animal Services Facility potential location. I'm going to be directing staff to make opening comments. I will open it up for public comment and questions. The questions that you ask will be handled at the end. Staff will write the questions down and will respond at the end. But I'll bring it back to the board for further direction to staff. Okay, Steve?
Just a quick thing. I'd like to extend my apologies for your long wait. I know this day got started with heavy public comment and participation, and we were kind of behind schedule by about 9:15 this morning, and it just kept getting more involved with the last session. But again, my apologies. I know you've all been waiting a long time. And we're here to hear what you say till the cows come home, so we won't truncate. We won't truncate this process just because we were late.
Jane, he's not.
happy to know that I'm not speaking.
Okay, then we'll be out of here by
That's why we're all here, actually.
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Boyce first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and the public. This study session is a follow-up to board direction that was given just about a year ago to staff to look at potential sites for a future animal services facility. The Humane Society has graciously offered to raise money to build a new facility and has asked the county where that facility might be located. The board directed staff to see what we might find in terms of a future site. So today, we're happy to say, after many months of talking to many different people and looking at the various sites available to us within this tight time frame of a year, we're here to present you with our findings. And with that, and many thanks to Brian Moss and other staff that have helped, as well as Jean and Karen and the architect and others from the Humane Society who were participated in the discussions. So with that, I think we should just dive into the presentation.
Thank you. Brian Moss, Environmental Management Agency. Just like to cover a few basics before we begin. Some fundamental issues that we'll be discussing. I just want to acknowledge the parties that have been involved. That includes the Calaveras Humane Society, Swapmeyer's Architects, Calaveras County Water District, Calaveras Public Utility District, San Andreas Sanitary District, City of Angels, and finally Pacific Gas and Electric. From county offices, of course, it's administration, the Sheriff's Office, GIS, Building, Planning, Public Works, and of course Environmental Management. Possible sites will be discussed today include two here in San Andreas. One is here at Government Center. The other one is at Highway 49 in Angels Road. And actually, if you're not familiar with that site, it's just outside of town here. Funding. This is a very important aspect. Cost estimates are very rough at this juncture. We're very early in the process, and the board should be aware that additional yet unidentified costs are or shall occur. And again, we have done the best we can with rough estimates we have, but they are rough estimates. Acreage, the Government Center site is plus minus 3 acres, depending upon the availability, and we'll discuss that when we get to the map. The Highway 49 Angels Road is 15.24 acres, and finally Highway 4 and Vallecito Road is 4+ acres. The important thing to remember, and we'll discuss this again, is environmental review. Environmental review will be necessary to support locating the new animal services facility, and such study will undoubtedly result in additional costs. So with that said, I would like to move forward. Several meetings were held, meetings were held in March, June, and July to discuss possible locations for development of the new animal services facility. And the members that were really active in those meetings were the Calaveras Humane Society and Swapmeyer's Architects, as well as some of the county departments. The primary criterion for choosing a site was for the property to be owned by the county. The county doesn't own a lot of property, which I think is a good thing. It does a lot for Calaveras County and us being conservative, but it didn't help a whole lot in searching for property. Location, accessibility, and infrastructure was being considered. While multiple sites were discussed, the group ultimately settled on two possibilities, including the government center site and the Highway 4 and Vallecito Road, formerly Highway 4. The Highway 4 and Vallecito Road site, although currently a Caltrans right-of-way, can be transferred to the county at no cost. Our Public Works Director can address the particulars of that for the board should you be curious. The other issue here is, additionally, although not meeting the above cited parameters for current ownership, the 15.24 acre parcel has been recently surplused by the Calaveras County Water District and will be discussed at the conclusion of this presentation. It's also very important to note that the Calaveras Humane Society did not have an opportunity to consider this site when we had our meetings in March, June, and July because we were unaware of the site, and I want to say it's been maybe a month or a little bit longer since CCWD actually surplused that property, so we took a quick look at it. I would also like to state that if you note your packet, that staff is recommending that the board consider pursuing ultimately the Highway 4 and Vallecito Road site as a viable area for development of the new facility. So this is the Highway 4 and Vallecito Road. This is formerly Highway 4. Highway 4 used to go right through the park. As a matter of fact, that's an older layer, as you can tell, because the road exists underneath the parcel, proposed parcel. Vallecito Road, and there's a horseshoe around that parcel. And for those of you who are not familiar with the site, this is the bypass. This is actually the bridge area right here. The new Highway 4 comes in, dives into the older part of Highway 4. This has since become Vallecito Road. This parcel here, as you can see, is 4.37 acres in size. That's an estimate from what we can tell. Again, those numbers as far as acreage is concerned, you might move up a tenth or down a tenth or something when we actually work with Caltrans on securing that property should we decide to pursue it for this project or some other project consistent for the county. Again, another site as provided by Swap Myers Architects. This one is in Government Center proper. This is the main library, behavioral health. This is the subdivision up behind it, and the crisis center here, I want to say. The question here is going to be if the board decides to place a facility at Government Center, do you also consider giving this as part of the facility? This is very important to the Humane Society, mainly because they really need acreage. Now, the one thing I do want to specify is both of these drawings, this one and this one, are essentially the same facility, essentially the same building, maximum capacity of 17,000 square feet. Okay? Doesn't mean that they'll build that big facility. And again, my understanding is it's to be a shared facility between the Humane Society and Animal Services proper. So the Swap Myers did a good job of at least giving us some idea of what that would look like.
What's the size of that?
17,000 square feet.
The parcel itself?
Oh, no, the parcel? That parcel is just plus minus 3 acres. So just to discuss the pros and cons of these two sites, and again, we'll discuss the CCWD surplus site at the end of this. High visibility for the Highway 4 Vallecito Road site. I kind of ran out of room, so I put the map down here. As you can see, certainly you have high visibility from the highway, and certainly that wouldn't be a bad thing when it comes to facilities such as this that is available for the public. There's no adjoining residences or what we call single-family dwellings, at least directly. The 6-mile gravity sewer line is also on site. That sewer line is actually a Calaveras County Water District sewer line. It feeds the Angels Camp wastewater treatment facility. So I've been in contact with both CCWD and met with them on this, as well as the City of Angels, to talk about, you know, if we can tie into this line, not only what does it cost, but will you treat it? So these are the infrastructure issues that came up as we started looking at the site. There's a lot more to this than just looking and saying that looks like a good site. It's easily accessible off of Highway 4, obviously, and Vallecito Road, even in its current configuration, which I think would be changed somewhat. Cost to hook to the City of Angels water for a water connection fee is $9,200. That is if a water line is installed. Now, the caveat here, to talk about it under cons, is that that water line, the existing water line, is approximately a quarter mile away. And there's a cost associated with extending that water line, a 10-inch water line. Also, cost to hook up to CCWD in the City of Angels. The sewer connection fee is $21,924 with a monthly service fee of $126. You'll notice I handed out some sheets that you can see a comparison on the cost from one site to the other. It's a little bit clearer than trying to memorize these as we go along. So the cons to the Highway 4 and Vallecito Road site, our cost to connect to PG&E is $47,000. That's the most expensive cost that we could come up with, and I say that because there's two alternatives. One would be getting an easement through property and doing a straight shot line of about 3 poles overhead before you go to underground at the property. That's not likely to occur. So the other option was, and that's about half the cost. The other option is to connect to the old Larry bypass where the lines cross the old Larry bypass, install poles along that right-of-way, and there is a right-of-way there, and an easement that's large enough to accommodate that, and then proceed up the old Highway 4 on Vallecito Road. I think that PG&E stated that's probably about a 6-pole installation, so it's about twice the material, at least on the rough estimate. Extensive grading will be required, including possible, I'd say, removal or relocation of rock, overburden, and topsoil may need to be brought onto the site. I say that because when I took the Public Works Director out there, I can't tell you how many times I've been on that site with PG&E and CCWD and everybody else, but it was stated that material, the overburden, because a lot of that's a stockpile today, may be able to be moved down to the toe of the parcel to be used as a base, and there may actually be enough soil on site. I don't know the answer to that, but certainly it's enough to list here as a potential, which of course would add to the cost. But that again is an on-site cost. What we're talking about today is really the off-site cost from an infrastructure standpoint. How much is it going to cost you to make that parcel viable? Again, water will need to be brought to the site for installation of a quarter-mile water line at a cost of approximately $87,000. The alternative to that is to drill a well, and that would be a commercial well. You just heard in the previous study session about groundwater. That part of the county, I can't tell you specifically what the water availability is for groundwater on that parcel. What I can tell you is in the area of the tertiary underground river channel system, which are the underground buried rivers, that's where you're seeing the productions of 400, 500 gallons a minute on wells like at Toyon. So, and that also is the area where, when we lost the flume to the Darby fire, I want to say it was, where they pumped water out of a mine shaft off the Dogtown Road and supplied the City of Angels with water for over a month, dropping static water level only 40 feet at 500,000 gallons a day. Anyway, that's a lot of stuff. But interesting to know. So the alternative is to put in a well. The estimates of that, including booster pump, storage tank, and source capacity testing, that's our requirement, approximately $50,000. The drawback to that is, if we do that, then they're also regulated by us as a small public water system, similar to the way we regulate the airport. This is going to be a fairly consistent thing you're going to see from site to site, except for on this site, there's no current general plan or zoning designation. The process includes making an application and paying processing fees and having at least one hearing before the planning commission, as the board knows, and also before the board proper. Environmental review will be necessary to support the new shelter or any new shelter. As with any project, this will involve preparation of studies such as traffic, noise, and other issues to fully address potential impacts from the construction of such a facility, say construction and housing. Moving on to the government center site, which is this site here, which you already noted in your presentation. Infrastructure is in place: water, sewer, and electrical. That's a big issue. The site would be fairly easy to grade. It's easily accessible. We already have our roads and driveways here. Now, of course, there are other issues that would probably have to be considered as the new detention facility is being constructed. Cost to hook up to the Calaveras Public Utility District, which is the water connection fee, is just a little bit more than the City of Angels. It is still under $10,000. That does include addition of a fire hydrant. Cost to hook up to San Andreas Sanitary District sewer connection fee is $34,762, and that's not a lot of money for what we're estimating at 2 connections. That's what the districts are estimating us at, 2 connections for wastewater. Monthly service fee is $248, albeit more than the Angel site. Government center, obviously, you're not going to have the visibility that you do at the highway for Vallecito Road site, so it's a lower visibility site. Residences, single-family dwellings, this is a very big issue I see in this site. They're within close proximity. I think we're moving into a CEQA issue there. County main library may directly be impacted by sound. Now, to be fair about this, the architect has stated that there are some mitigating measures that can be taken to help squelch, shall we say, some of the noise. Here he has shown, you can't see it from where you're at, but here's a line of trees as an example, and of course their insulation and that type of thing. They're going to be able to take down the decibel level a certain amount. Unlike the City of Angels site, or I should say the Highway 4 site, the site already has a general plan designation, but still could result in required public hearings again before the Planning Commission and the board. And again, environmental review will be necessary to support the new shelter for the reasons cited there and cited before. Moving on to the Highway 49 and Angels Road CCWD surplus land site. High visibility, very obvious. It's high visibility. It's right here. This is the old airport. Right in this area here. This is Angels Road. Comes in and dives into Highway 49. Dives into Highway 49 on the other side. The parcel again is a nice sized parcel. You actually have a road here, and I want to say that's the access road to the old airport. So it's easily accessible. It's highly visible. Easily accessible in one term because there's a road there, but we're going to discuss that. In fact, it's not as easily accessible if we build what we want to build out there as we think. Cost to hook up to the Calaveras Public Utility District, again, we're looking at that $10,000 mark. I spoke with Donna from CPUD before the study session, and she stated that actually there's some infrastructure that would need to be put in the ground before the parcel I was unaware of to bring that water line over the parcel. I noticed when I went out there a water box right off the property, but the problem is, it's like right in here, but the problem is that's like a 1-inch line that will not suffice for development of a facility such as we're considering today. The cons. District cost at 19, I want to say Larry Diamond said 1999, somewhere around that time, was $335,000. County cost to acquire the property is unknown. It could be more, it could be less. One thing that you're not seeing there is real estate transaction fees, anything like that that would be associated with the transfer of the property or sale of the property. So what I did is I took the most conservative number I had, which was 335, which is what they purchased it for, and plugged it into the formula. You'll see, I have for everybody out in the audience, board here that shows those numbers. Of course, I have handouts as well, and so does the board to see the comparison. Cost to extend the sewer line is that same estimated $87,000. The sewer line does not reach, the SASD sewer line does not reach that parcel. Again, these numbers, as far as the cost estimates, I was fortunate enough to have Bill Purley, CCWD, help me with that because they just had some work done. And they knew how much they cost per linear foot to put pipe in the ground. Unknown Caltrans Highway 49 requirements would need to be addressed, but likely include installation of a new intersection. If that's possible, you would think that intersection would have here where this other road dies in, or this road would have to be brought down here. The issue is, and I'm not a roads person, but the issue is, right in this area is where Highway 49 has a passing lane. So, according to our public works director, that may not be feasible, even if you know, we could consider it. According to CCWD, they were looking at astronomical costs for putting in an intersection if that were feasible, and I want to say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of, well in excess of $1 million. Zoning would need to be changed, and I don't see this being a real issue, from split zoning of M1 industrial C2 commercial to possible public service. Something to be done in-house with our planning department. Cost to hook up to San Andreas Sanitary District sewer connection fee is $50,242. Why is that more than it is at Government Center, and why is the monthly service fee $620 rather than $200 something? The answer to that is the CCWD has an obligation. I want to say we're going to have built a facility that was going to have up to 15 service connections or somewhere in that neighborhood. This is the cost that they would be paying San Andreas Sanitary District, and this is, I believe, the monthly cost that they probably incurred to this day. Our facility, we're talking about a two-connection facility. Big difference. Do you renegotiate with San Andreas Sanitary District if all these other issues can be addressed? Again, like the Government Center site, it already has a general plan and zoning designation. Again, we're looking at the Planning Commission potentially and the board. And then the environmental review as with the other two sites. Here, of course, is this map. You can kind of see a little bit better. Here's that road hitting here. This is Angels Road moving along here. Again, a great site. High visibility, lots of acreage. I just don't know if there is those kinds of funds to consider a site like this, especially when we start talking about road improvements, yet unidentified. A photo looking south, where Angels Road actually intersects with Highway 49. The other road is right up here, going up to the old airport. So, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to the board for questions.
Are there any questions of Brian at this time?
I just have a question about criteria. It struck me that one of the things we want to think about is that this is, I presume, and I'd like to hear from the Humane Society on this as well, but the idea that this is a facility to serve the whole county, and I wonder whether the centrality of location, a place where people from all over the county don't have to travel inordinately far, whether that was part of the consideration in pros or cons for any of these sites.
Actually, that was something that we considered, and obviously San Andreas being the county seat, fairly centrally located, has its positive aspects, there's no question about that. The Highway 4, while it's not centrally located in the county, it's on a main artery, and it's very accessible and very high profile. So I think when I spoke with the Calaveras Humane Society, that was one of the things we talked about. What's really realistic here, and what's accessible. The way I noted it was, the high visibility on the main artery was probably outweighing the fact that it might not be in the county seat.
Two other criteria. I've noticed that when adoption is one of the key goals, and certainly that's been, moving from a kill site to an adoption site is important. So the areas to play with animals, surrounding kind of park-like settings, seem to mitigate toward adoptions. And I wonder whether that was a criteria. And finally, the question of split staff and administration. The sheriff's office is currently the administration of this, and if you were to move it off this site, what would be, are there any cons involved in having staff split between, or a single department split between different sites?
Well, certainly the last question would be something that the sheriff's office would have to answer. I'm sorry, could you restate the second one, Steve?
The second one was the question of staff split.
Well, before that, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. The kind of part, the adoptability factor, the question of whether there's areas to play, and for people to experience their possible adoption in a good setting that mitigates toward adoption.
What's really interesting about that is that was something else that was discussed, and you are correct. That was brought up. My understanding is when you're looking at the Angels site, or the Highway 4 site, or the Angels site, which is right outside of the City of Angels city limits, is that there are trails, or potential trails, and potential building out for animals to be walked, not just on site, or to be on site, but to be off site as well. Now that's obviously something that has to be negotiated with trails, with future planning, but the potential is there because you're not surrounded with residences, and that was one of the things that was discussed in the meetings, yes.
I have a question. First off, just a comment. I think that is within the sphere of influence of the City of Angels.
Yes.
So I think you need to talk to the City of Angels. And having said that, two other comments. I think, don't hold me to this, but I think if you look at the new general plan for the City of Angels, I think they're showing a potential 49 bypass of Angels that would come up and then take off right in this area somewhere, and then come in out by Carson Hill. So you need to look at that and to see if that a potential bypass alignment would be impacted by a potential facility here. And then thirdly, at one point, the city was looking, and I think Tim Shearer was the advocate for this, but at one point, you can see on the left there where the trees are, that's Angels Creek, and there's a big bridge over Angels Creek. At one point, the city was an advocate of coming off of Highway 4 on the right, if you're coming down from Murphy's, and to loop under that bridge and connect up then to the old Highway 4. And if they did that, I'm sure that would have some impact on what we're looking at here on the map. Now, I don't know, that was a big advocacy of Tim Shearer when he was the city administrator. He's still, I don't know what to say, the city administrator. They have an interim, I'm not sure. I think he's on the leave of absence.
Yeah, he is.
So great. So he may be back. And that, I don't know if that's going to resurface or not. I don't know if you look at the circulation element of the city's general plan, you can see that and talk to Dave Hanham, whether that's still something the city is considering, because it looked like it would work quite well at one point. If you had a right turn off and then came back under the bridge, because that's a huge bridge that spans Angels Creek, and then you would tie into the old Highway 4. So you have a potential 49, you have the bridge, if you do the right turn off and come back under the bridge to the old Highway 4. And it's in the sphere of influence. So I would get some involvement from the city fairly early to see if this is going to remain in the running.
We agree. As a matter of fact, I met with Dave and Gene did as well. I received a notice. It's rather non-committal, a letter. I say non-committal because they can't really identify anything until the county decides if they even want to look at this site seriously. And you're absolutely correct, Tom. Dave does address he says as part of the State 4 bypass project, Caltrans and the city identified the intersection of State Route 4 and Vallecito failing with cumulative traffic condition. As a part of mitigating that impact, additional land was set aside. And he says to allow for the right exit of State Route 4 to go underneath the highway and connect with Vallecito Road.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what I think you're addressing.
That's what I was addressing.
He says currently there has been no preferred alignment selected for that project. However, the city and county will need to sit down and meet to discuss different alternatives for that piece.
Well, you have to take off on the right, and if it's going to come under the bridge, you're going to have to stay on this side of the creek, otherwise you have another bridge.
Right.
So I mean, it may not, the alignment may not have been selected, but there's only one alignment that works.
Right. And Dave did bring that up.
Yeah, so you need to be aware of that, and then you need to look at the 49 bypass and see if there's a potential impact from it. If in fact, who knows? I mean, no alignment has been selected, but they want to have it come off in this area someplace as I think the preferred alternative for a 49 bypass of Angels Camp.
Correct. And he stated also here, based on the current configuration, the primary access will need to be adjusted westerly to accommodate for traffic coming west off of Highway 4. So that's going to, I imagine that's going to occur whether the county, whether we pursue this site or not. That sounds like that's something that is something that they would like to pursue.
So hold on a minute. I want to understand what Tom is saying. So then you're saying the 49 bypass would use part of Highway 4 and come down, and then it would break off here and maybe
No, it'd probably break off further up.
Further up?
Yeah, probably up.
And break off here and then go around and completely and
There's a
tie
big
in.
mountain just this size, so they got to come around the base of the mountain. They're not going to go through the middle of the mountain.
So this part right in here would be affected possibly.
Well, that would be my thought. If it's going to be affected, it will be affected on that end. I guess in the interest of full disclosure, I don't think I have a conflict in any way. But
and Brian,
all that land, see where it says Vallecito Road?
Yes.
All the land on the lower side?
Yes.
That's all owned by my family.
Yeah.
And in fact, that 4.37 acres that's there, probably about 3.6 or 7 was condemned for the Highway 4 project from my family. But, the family, obviously it's owned by Caltrans. The family has no interest in it. And we do own the land that's on the lower side of that. So where's council? Council's not here, but this is a study session. But I don't think that would leave me with a conflict necessarily. But because I have no financial interest in the property that's owned by Caltrans.
And the way this is configured right now, that's an existing parcel that was carved out by Caltrans?
Actually, this parcel is what kind of is what I call a remainder. It still needs to be, it's all it is today is a right of way. That's all it really is. Now, Tom Garcia can address the Vallecito Road / parcel issue and why this is even available. I'm not sure if Tom is here.
Yeah.
Okay. One other thing, Brian, if you go to the lower end, where it's a sharp triangle right there, Well, you just come down a little bit from there, and there's a residence.
Yes.
There's a residence before you, that road on the, there's a residence right in there somewhere.
Right in here. Right
So
in
you
here.
need to be aware of that. And then that little yellow line that goes from Roleri Bypass up to that point, that's the old Highway 4.
Right.
And the other thing to note, just for the record, is the City of Angels is contemplating and using some COG funds under the T program to put a walking path along Angels Creek. And that walking path, I believe, goes to the New Maloney's property, all the way up Angels Creek through Angels Camp, help me, Tom, and it ends there. Remember, they had it going further up the creek through the Roleri property, and then you read all the headlines about how that caused a significant amount of controversy. So now they want the walking path to end there at Roleri Bypass Road, which would be almost right next to the property. And Roleri Bypass is not a vehicular road anymore because the Angels Camp bypass cut it in half. But one of the things I've talked to Tom Garcia about, and I think we should look at it, that's putting a walking bridge over the Highway 4 bypass so that we could still use Roleri Bypass then as a walking path that takes you to the grade road and then back to the high school. And before the Roleri Bypass was cut in half, it was used extensively for hiking and for the cross-country team and people just walking in Angels Camp. And it made a nice loop from the high school all the way through downtown and then back to the high school. And that's something that I think should be looked at in the future. So that's my input.
Mr. Garcia, Brian, you would ask Tom to make a...
I can address the right-of-way issue briefly. When Vallecito Road was realigned, Caltrans acquired, as part of the Highway 4 bypass project, the parcel around it. They maintained it as right-of-way. When they perfected the grant or the dedication of the county right-of-way back to the county, once the bypass is completed, they neglected to address the realignment of Vallecito Road and all of this area that was considered right-of-way. Caltrans approached us to take over the maintenance of Vallecito Road in the county, in the unincorporated area, and along with it, they were going to just provide this property as right-of-way associated with that. The county, upon acceptance of that, will create the right-of-way and this parcel, which we can do internally with our. The county has the ability to create parcels of county-owned land, so that the right-of-way should not be an issue.
Tom, did you have any questions of Mr. Garcia?
No. Well, I guess one quick question, Tom, and that is, when we get right away from Caltrans for road purposes, can we just change the purpose like that?
Yes, the county, within certain parameters dealing with zoning and land use, once those are established, but the county has the ability to create parcels. We are, as the government agency, we are exempt from certain MAP Act issues. We can create a parcel out of right-of-way or remnants.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have a question, Mr. Garcia?
Actually, it's for Tom.
Yeah.
Brian mentioned that there is a sewer line that comes across this parcel. If you can, I've got my map. It's right there. Okay,
I want one of those.
So Brian,
yours has to be blue.
If you connect that point right there and this point down here,
Yes.
the sewer line was adjacent to the old highway alignment?
I want to say, and CCWD is here, I want to say that sewer line was modified as part of this bypass. I'm not sure, because when you go out there, and when I went out there and I found the manholes and the vaults, it was fairly new concrete around there. And I want to say CCWD...
Yeah, they did move the line. They moved the line for the Highway 4 bypass.
Right. So it's actually a little bit, you're absolutely correct. It would have gone right here, but it's a little bit further over this way.
Well, the point that I want to make is that the architect, in putting the footprint of the building exactly where he did, was he aware that there was an adjacent possible conflict with a utility, an underground utility?
I can't state whether he was or not. I can tell you that I've got AT&T lines running up here. I didn't get an estimate from them because they didn't respond. But I've got underground AT&T lines. I've got underground sewer, obviously, sewer lines heading up here. I've got telephone, well, like I say, underground telephone here, and I've got a terminus out here of above-ground telephones just off the property. As far as that easement, I do not know. And again, the parcel hasn't been developed, so that would be something we'd have to go back to Public Works and Planning to say, if we put the structure in the area as proposed, or can we put it there, or do we have to tweak it, or move it down, or move it up? What do we have to do to make that work? But as far as on-parcel easements, I'm not sure how that applies. But certainly it's something that we need to look at as we move forward, should the board decide to even look at this part.
Okay, well, all that previous discussion about the possible creation of a route that would come westbound, come underneath and stay on this side of the creek, I don't see that as being like a deal killer, because having another road coming on this part of the parcel, or that side of the parcel, and then connecting into Vallecito, you may lose a little net acreage, but it's not a deal killer in my mind.
Right. I think what you make up potentially, it's not net acreage, but area, usable area, is what Tom was talking about with having the hiking paths and that type of thing, terminating somewhere down in this area. Is that, and of course you have the old highway isn't that correctly, over here. There's a lot of area out there that may be used with obviously owner's permission. I mean, so that's another issue altogether. But as far as the path is concerned, I think what you have here, and I didn't even put it as a pro, but you have the potential to have some offsite taking care of the animals. Walking dogs. We've seen them walking in here in the Government Center. This would be, if they didn't stay on the site, this walking path, that would be a real plus, certainly. And also, one last comment is, the PG&E lines currently run right across here. There's a very high pole right here that was used as part of the construction of the, it's probably actually right here, part of the Highway 4 bypass, and it's obviously not being used anymore. There's one pole back. If there was an easement that could have been granted, we would have taken 3 poles to get over here to go underground. We're taking a more expensive approach. We would tie in either on this side of the Will Larry bypass or this side, come along, put the poles along Will Larry bypass and up Vallecito Road.
And where's the water line?
The water line is not on the site. It's a quarter mile down, so I don't know if it's this way or this. I'm guessing it's down this way. The city limit sign is literally right down here. So I want to say it's sort of Stealthy Village.
Stealthy Park.
Stealthy Park.
Right. That's where you'll find the water line.
And I think that's where we would have to come from.
Yeah.
Now, the City of Angels also stated, I don't know if the city's here today, I did call them, and they've been in the loop. But I'm not sure, I should say, they stated that they don't know which would be the best path to bring the water. They seem to be willing, at least from Dave's letter, to say, yes, we'll consider these things, we do have capacity. That was very important. We can always put a septic system on here. I'd rather not do that. We can drill a well. I would rather not do that. That's not to say you don't have those options. You do have those options. Public service, in my personal opinion, is always better than something that you have to develop on site.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, did you have a question?
Well, you said early on that if you did run a water line up there, it would be a 10-inch water line.
That's what the city would require.
Well, but that I think that it kind of goes without saying that there would be a reimbursement clause on that, because you certainly wouldn't need a 10-inch water line for this facility. So if you had to pay for a 10-inch water line, the county would be well served by getting a reimbursement agreement that if somebody else hooked up to it.
Right. And again, we haven't gotten to that depth because at this juncture, we didn't know which site the board ultimately you're going to choose. But certainly, if you were to pick this site, then, which we personally like, then certainly it brings us to another level of, okay, now what are we looking at for designs? What are we looking at for true capacity? What are we looking for true costs? That kind of thing. You'll notice in the handout that I gave you that says Animal Services Facility Cost Breakdown, I threw in a 20% unanticipated cost factor on the bottom of those items, just because I know that there's going to be an unidentified cost. Is that going to be enough? Probably not. Especially when you're looking at the CEQA. I don't think AT&T is a deal killer, but I think CEQA on any of the sites, you've got a cost associated with that. You've got unanticipated costs that come along when you actually start getting ready to break ground, and I just know that from growing up in the trades. That's just a fact of life. What I would also like to state, since I'm bringing that sheet to your attention, you'll notice that I put some footnotes here. Well development, I put Highway 4 and Vallecito Road cost of well development if the water main is not extended to the site. That's not included. You'll see on number 2, footnote number 2, where it says cost, and it has $165,124. Does not include $50,000 well development cost when you're looking at the total for the Highway 4 and Vallecito site. I mean, it's going to be one or the other. Factor both costs in. And also, finally, on the PG&E, it assumes the most costly path, like stated before, 600 amp service, 6 poles, 1 transformer, and 150 feet of underground service. So I know I kind of beat that into the ground, but that's important.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from the board? I'd like to turn it over to Karen Elliott, who's been a member of the development team and is representing the Calaveras Humane Society on this project.
Thank you, Marita. Karen Elliott, I live in Arnold, and I'm the Vice President of Operations for the Humane Society and one of the original New Shelter team members. At the November Board of Directors meeting of the Calaveras Humane Society, the New Shelter Project team described the pros and cons of each of the sites as Brian Moss has detailed them at the time. He was missing a few utility quotes, but we were mostly there with the finished details. The views of the board members were discussed, and they ranged from I don't like any of them particularly to let's get the show on the road. At the end, we recommended the Vallecito bypass site for the following reasons. One, the site is a size that allows us to plan for the future and accommodation of a large animal facility. There are no residences that will be impacted, except the one down at the bottom. The visibility is excellent, and after all, we are in the business of finding new forever homes for the animals, not for keeping them there. The county center site is awkward and small. It is located in the middle of the county campus and would inhibit future development of county services facilities, which we believe will be needed for you before too long. After all, how long does mental health want to stay in, quote, temporary buildings, unquote, and rent other facilities in San Andreas? The fact that the library is located near the site and a subdivision located across the road make the CEQA problematic, and we're not interested in prolonged political fight with the neighbors. The visibility is not nearly as good at the Vallecito site because it is not on a main artery. We understand that it is not in the center of the county, but this is, as I understand it, the second largest county in the state of California, and another 10 miles probably is not going to matter that much, probably 15 miles. The Highway 49 site, while probably the most desirable of all, has too many costs associated with it, as Brian has described, not to mention creating a new intersection on Highway 49. It is important to note that we have encouraged our membership and volunteers to come and express their views today. The Calaveras Humane Society is a diverse group of incredible people. They've dedicated themselves to bettering a lot of abandoned animals in this county and have provided hours, at least 2.5 unpaid workers at the existing county shelter that you don't have to pay for. They're very vocal and committed to the cause. You'll hear lots of heartfelt and varied opinions. If I may, I'd like to introduce George Myers of Swat Myers Architects. The firm is internationally known for their innovative and environmentally sound developments of animal shelters. Mr. Myers and his associates have completed considerable work on our needs assessment, as well as working with county staff to provide them with the information necessary to make calculations relevant to sewer and water service. We look forward after you've made your decision, to meeting with Jeannie Boyce, the county chief administrator, with your county attorney, and the new sheriff, Gary Kuntz, with whom we've been in touch. We've had several positive conversations with him. In the new year, we'd like to negotiate a new private-public partnership for the betterment of the animals of Calaveras County with one of these sites in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Mr. Myers, did you want to? She introduced you, so.
He answers all questions.
Just say yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is George Myers. I'm with the firm Swap Myers, and I'd be more than glad to answer any questions you have. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, and thank you for working with our Humane Society and the county. I've seen many emails go between your office and Brian.
The county staff's been incredible, and Brian's actually done all the work. He's made our life much easier.
So a question that was asked earlier, I think Mr. Thomas asked about, did you want to?
Well, I didn't realize that the architect was represented here, but the question that came to mind is that with the discussion about the sewer line going across that property, were you aware of a specific location?
Well, we knew there was something roughly in that area. You could tell from the drawing. We had trouble getting a base drawing. I mean, we normally wouldn't put a drawing like that, without the roads on it. We couldn't get a drawing that had the roads. We had, obviously one would like to get exactly where utilities are. We couldn't even get the roads, let alone the utilities. Maybe to explain, I think your last comment was a good one that, I think there's enough flexibility on this site to run things, other roads and right-of-ways for utilities there. The purpose of all the diagrams we did were really just to get a sense of what the maximum program, and it's probably something less than that in the first phase that would be built, but what the maximum program over time would be on any of these sites, and really not to provide a design, although we actually, even though that's a little white blob, we actually did a full layout of all the spaces just to make sure, we were talking about something realistic. But the exact configuration, the exact design is something that I think on any of these three sites, including the government center site, could be manipulated around to make things work. Getting back to your specific question, we had an idea that there was a line running somewhere between there. We thought there was plenty of room to maneuver the buildings to avoid that if it was there once we found out exactly where that location was.
Thank you.
Do any of the other board members have questions of Mr. Myers? Ms. Elliott mentioned, of course, your experience and all this, and about sound barriers, or Brian mentioned it. What are some examples of sound barriers that can be used in the shelter?
Well, I think we actually meant the trees as more of a visual barrier, since it would,
I hear the shelter right down here, and there are a lot of trees, so.
Well, yeah, we've done a number of shelters that are actually right next to residential areas. I was actually mentioning before the meeting started, or the hearing on this subject started, that probably our most difficult client, and I give them out now as a reference, and I'll put this on the table now if you want to call them, was actually the Antioch Police Department. This was probably 18, 19 years ago. It was the first shelter we actually did, and we were actually designing a police building. The design was completed. There was a fair amount of site left over, and we had kind of laid out the plan so that you could put a future building. At the last minute, the city manager did some deal with the developer in town to put some housing in the downtown area where the existing shelter was, and he remembered there was some site here, and the next thing you know, we were putting the shelter next to the building. The police department union actually filed a grievance because they were so upset that after years of waiting for their new facility, that was the animal shelter now, was going to be adjacent, and police department ran the animal shelter. Anyway, to make a long story short, the city did place the animal shelter there. It's actually connected. It has separate outside entrance. It is an all-indoor facility, and I think if you called anybody over there, there's no odor issues. They can't hear the dogs. I mean, acoustically, the point of the story is that acoustically, and I think environmentally from an odor point of view, which are usually the major concerns, you can bring down the decibel level to generally whatever the city required, county required outdoor, ambient noise level is with the building. In fact, the buildings, the animal shelters we design, we have as much concern inside the building actually dropping the decibel level from dog area to dog area so that they don't get themselves, riled up by hearing each other bark. Getting the perimeter skin to actually, help you mitigate that sound level is actually the easier part of it than within the building. I think the concern comes about when you are wanting to place animals outside, let's say, not so much for walking, because I think in most shelters today, usual procedures are if you have dogs outside, whether they're meeting with the public in a get acquainted or adoption kind of mode, or even for training. If the dog barks, that's not socially acceptable. They come inside. Dogs are not left generally on their own outside, at animal shelters when you have staff there working with them. The exception comes about where you have indoor-outdoor runs, and that's where the problem, kind of happens. Can you mitigate sound in an indoor-outdoor kennel in a residential area? Now, we are doing a couple. We have one that's just about completed in the new City of Palm Springs shelter, which is right across from some residential areas. But I'm told to say I don't know, totally about, the mitigation of sound, because technically, when you run all the counts, it's not dropping it below the ambient noise level. But we've designed a courtyard and all sorts of devices to help deflect the sound. It becomes very difficult. I think on the sites that you're looking at here, and I think it's actually something that, probably, you might want to add another category in here, is that in your government center, I would think that you would probably, this is your decision, but I would, knowing how these things go with the other uses around the library, residential areas, you'd probably opt to make this an all-indoor facility as opposed to an indoor-outdoor facility. I don't know that. We've had discussions about that. Whereas the other two sites, and I think particularly the Vallecito site, even with the one residence there, I think there's enough room that you could do an indoor-outdoor facility. If you were comparing, complete apples to apples in terms of number of animals and uses and stuff, if you have an indoor-outdoor facility, you're actually going to have somewhat less indoor conditioned space that you would build than if it was an all-indoor facility, same amount of space for the animals. So actually, in an indoor-outdoor facility, they will tend to be a little less expensive. So, in other words, if you were kind of looking at the cost comparisons on these sites, and if you took the position that a site at the government center most likely would be indoor and the other ones would be indoor-outdoor, that's an assumption. There's probably an added cost that might actually be it's probably in the order of the delta that you've got now between the two shown here. It's probably, a $3, $4, maybe $5 a square foot difference for the added indoor square footage, plus probably the extra things you would be doing to make sure that you were acoustically, acoustically treating the exterior wall. So that's probably the one wrinkle, or the one issue on the three sites that I would think you might bring into play, relative to noise, and odor would not be an issue in any of them if the facility's handled correctly. And just one last thing, in terms of the water line, you're probably looking at somewhere between a 2.5 and 3 inch main or line coming into the building, and a lot of times, depending on what the meters tend to be very expensive in places. Sometimes we'll bring in 2 inches to avoid the cost of a 3 inch, which is 4 times the 2 inch, and things like that. But it would be something along that order, and you'd want to have a 6 inch sewer line leaving the facility. And one of the issues with septics, which is why You won't find them very often. There are some shelters that do have septic systems, and there are some ways you could do it. But your traditional septic, you probably wouldn't do, and that's just because of the chemicals that are used to, just for disease control and the cleaning of the animal shelter just isn't conducive to most septic systems, or it certainly makes it an ongoing challenge to maintain those septic systems. So I would place a very high priority on finding a site that had sewer connections to it.
On that specific issue, do you find that municipalities that you place these facilities in, do they put a surcharge on the facilities because of the chemicals that you're using?
No. I mean, the chemicals are not. Usually when we go through a lot of CEQA situations, I mean, a lot of places, everybody starts getting all concerned about what's going down there. And I think when you actually look at what the chemicals are, probably the most difficult ones are degreasers that are probably not as difficult to deal with as many restaurants and other facilities have. But they are, when you're concentrating a load like that in a septic system, if the system's based on, your traditional septic system, it's an issue. So.
Are there any other questions or comments of Mr. Myers? Thank you.
Okay, and then if you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer.
I'd like to open it up for any public comments or questions on this item.
Is there a time frame like normal?
Yeah, for supervisors elects about 2 minutes.
I thought you were going to say 30 seconds.
How much time are you asking for? It's getting to be a late hour.
Not a lot.
Those 2 minutes aren't in a row either.
Yeah, right. Not a lot. I just want to make sure I get to address some of these things. I know there's been ongoing issues, and I'm excited for a new animal shelter to be created so that we can facilitate proper care of the animals that go through there, and hopefully have an increased number of adoptions and those type of things. I'd be first to admit that'd be great. Look at some of these things. There were some very obvious conclusions here as to why the site would not be best located at the proposed location. Tom brought up some ideas or concerns possibly that the City of Angels being in their sphere with some creek right-of-way there, possibly the 49 bypass, some other things like that. And one of the things that Steve touched on was the proximity of the location to the general populace. Now, most of the people here may not know, but I'm the supervisor-elect for District 5, which is part of Valley Springs, Rancho Calaveras area, and Copperopolis. If you put a pinpoint on the 1226 intersection and drew a circumference in a 10-mile radius of 1226, you would have over 25% of the population of this county live within a 10-mile radius of 1226. The current location at the government center, if you were to move it to this proposed location, would create an increased round-trip distance of no less than 20 to 25 miles for a quarter of the county's population. So if you want to talk about in terms of environmental impact, carbon footprint, et cetera, not to mention the other costs involved there, that would be a horrible location on that. So number one, I'm just going down the list here. Established location here at the government center. Most businesses, if they want to take over another business and start up a business, a known location that people have been going to for years and years and years is highly sought after. People are familiar to having it here. Number two, to have it here at the government center versus the proposed location near Vallecito, we might have a cause for more groundwater extraction, which we just heard testimonies at length about groundwater extraction. Number three was the point I made just a minute ago, 25% of the county's population in a 10-mile radius of Valley Springs. Number four, I think that it's possible that more animals would be adopted if the location remained within the government center. I know that my son frequently goes to the library with his grandparents for book reading sessions and things like that. I think that with a little bit of promotion, being close to the library, closer, within walking distance, I think that we might be able to see some more adoptions. And I think that with the proposed land there towards the back of the facility, where there could be some grassy area or whatever for people to play with the animals, I think that that could mitigate the idea that the other facility had more recreation area like that. Number 5, it's universally accepted best practice for future development. Nobody argues that to have a centralized center is the best practice. And so to extract something that we already have here with available space, to take it to somewhere else, to decentralize, rather than to continue with what's familiar, as well as in keeping with the idea of best practices of centralization, I think that it's keen to keep it at this site. Number 6, cost estimates. Proposed here cost estimates highly favor keeping it here at the government center, which, the proposed cost estimate is nearly $600,000 for the Vallecito site versus $53,000.
No, Vallecito is $198,000.
Oh, I'm talking about the wrong one then.
The other one in San Andreas.
Angels Camp, then. What's the one in Angels Camp?
$600,000.
$600,000, that's what I'm talking of.
No.
That's what I'm speaking
That's
of.
one
No,
in
the
San
Angels Camp,
Andreas.
the one in San Andreas.
49 in Angels is 600. The one in Vallecito
No, you're
no.
looking at Angels Road. That's not
Right.
Angels.
I know,
Angels Camp.
that's what I said, 49 in Angels
Oh.
Road. Highway 4 in Vallecito is $198,000.
The parcel that he's been showing up here as the preferred one.
The San
Right.
Andreas site is the 600, not the on-site here, up on
Yeah,
Highway
by the airport.
49.
That's
Yeah.
what we
refer to as
It
the
was-
Angels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The government
We
center
had
site.
it,
Look on the sheet,
Yeah.
everybody,
Just say
that
the
we're all
Angels
talking
Camp
the
site.
same.
yes.
Thank you, Mr.
The one
Spellman,
by
please go ahead.
the one by the creek in just outside Angels Camp.
Angels Camp site.
What's the cost projection on that one?
$198,000.
Okay, so 198, so 200,000 versus 50,000, we'll call it. So you got the cost difference there. The last thing that I would say is that in terms of guaranteed funding for staffing, the only guaranteed funding that we have for staffing on this, regardless of how philanthropic people may be in wanting to dedicate their time to helping out with the facility, the end result or the windup is the only guaranteed staffing that we have is through the Sheriff's Department. So to remove that to a different location, to a larger, expansive facility, with the number crunching that we have right now for our staff and the sheriffs, I think would be a problem. And last but not least, in terms of guaranteed staffing, I've got some people that have been working for over a decade in Valley Springs to get a park down there, a regional park, where they've got land from CCWD, they've got grants to build the park, but there's no parks district or whatever within the county to maintain that. There's nobody to continue to mow the grass and keep the landscaping up and things like that. So, if we were gonna go out on a limb and say let's build something without the ability to staff it and maintain it, I'd say let's build the regional park these people have been working on for a decade down in Valley Springs. That would bring a lot more economic prosperity to our county. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spillman. Does anyone else have any comments or they'd like to address on this? You could talk. It's either you talk here or you're going to call me. So.
Hi, Debbie Beaufort, Oak Hill. I'm a volunteer at the shelter, and I've been there for 8 years now. I've been a long time volunteer. I used to live darker. Anyway, I have concerns about the adoptions, and actually the points that Mr. Lewinsky brought up, because the people that come to the shelter here come here at this site at Government Center, come to do a lot of other things, and you get a lot of through traffic from that. Also, I'm afraid that the Vallecito site is far away, which is going to double the time at least for response time for the present officers, which are few and far between. And that's a big concern to me. And the other thing is, a good portion, you'd have to ask Sergeant Murray, because I don't have the stats in my head, but a good portion of the animals that come in come from the Vallecito area. So the officers spend a lot of time down there. And also, Valley Springs, sorry. Yes.
I knew what she meant.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
Right here.
I don't think that's right.
So those are concerns of mine that this central location or a location in San Andreas, I think, is really important.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wilford. Is there anyone else? Captain Ballard.
Captain Ballard, Sheriff's Department. As you know, I've currently got back animal services, and I'm extremely happy that I do have that. In between the time that I left and came back, all this took place to identify a parcel for a new animal shelter, which we do deeply need. I would, and I kind of looked at the properties and for the sheriff's side of it and the operational side of it, calls for service and program elements of it. There's a lot more that I would like to do, in looking at the property. I mean, I am for keeping it central, though, within the San Andreas area. I think, it will be much more beneficial on the operational side for us to keep it central.
Thank you, Captain Ballard. Mr. Wiley, did you want to? Okay. Does anybody else have any comments that they would like to make on this? Otherwise, I'll bring it back to the board.
I have one additional question. I'm curious, for those of you who have volunteered here at the shelter, or at our facility, I should say, in San Andreas, I'm wondering whether the location near the library affords a better area for walking. You've got the path that goes back and forth. You've got kind of a park-like setting adjacent to the library. Do you see any advantage to being over there? Is that enough space to do the things that both the exercise activity, but more importantly, the adoption? Is it an adoption-friendly site in your view?
Even though it's the smallest size, smallest acreage.
Smaller than we've got now.
Well, when we're looking to the future.
Out there, we walk over there, presently we walk down to that area to walk the dogs.
All right,
We stay on county property.
Right. Right, and a follow-up question is we've had a number of large animal moments, and I'm wondering whether you see the space to be able to handle that properly, and if not, is there another alternative that could be close enough to be worthwhile for that particular purpose?
I think you need to address that to Sergeant Murray, but if they've got where the building is, and that green part there, that's already flat, and that could be a large animal, I think. I don't know, I'm not an architect. Good.
Sergeant Murray, Keller Sheriff's Office, currently Supervisor Animal Services Division. Mr. Walensky, you were asking a large animal, or were you talking livestock type?
Yes, we've had some horses, a couple of donkeys, a bunch of goats. The question is, can we accommodate them at the proposed site adjacent to the library?
Well, what you're seeing up here is just kind of strictly your dog and cat shelter. We would need to figure out where we're going to put some type of livestock yard. I know Brian had mentioned or pointed out that kind of green swath there next to Public Works. If that's something that can be accessible to us, I mean, that would be a reasonable space to set up some corrals and shelters for our larger critters that we have to bring in occasionally.
Okay.
We have included a barn on that drawing. The back of that building right there.
Oh, so that would actually enter out into that space. All right, and that's been explored enough to the satisfaction of the Humane Society. All right.
And, just keep in mind too, as far as walking paths, because I do believe we do need those, and the folks that come out and walk the dogs, and we got 11.7 acres that we're building the adult detention facility on. And everything to the west of that, we've got some good areas to do some walking around here. And put in some good places. Keep in mind we have the areas that are outside of, that we'll never ever touch, and will always be a park setting in there. So
All right.
we do have some good options. We just really need to define our program for operations.
Thank you. Ms. Overy?
Quite a few adoptions through government centers. You'd be surprised.
The Board of Supervisors.
Hi, my name is Randy McNerland. I live in Calaveras County, but I was the shelter manager for Tuolumne for 6 years. One of the problems we had over there was residential. There was 3 houses within 100 yards of the shelter. And the biggest complaint we had was even with the dogs in the shelter, we had complaints of barking. And I'm sure that the new shelter that we build will probably be more sound proficient than the one in Tuolumne. But even we couldn't even leave the dogs outside. If you leave more than 2 dogs outside in a pen, they tend to bark, and that creates a problem with the residents. So if we do stay with the site, we would have to figure out a way of keeping the sound from going to the residential. And also the larger animals tend to have odors that we'd have to deal with. So I'm not saying not to do this, I'm saying we need to think about this things.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this?
If I may, one of the difficulties we've had is we don't have money budgeted to build a facility. We have the kindness of the Humane Society that has agreed to raise money to build a facility. And in trying to find a location quickly within a year that we own that can be done, we're constrained. If we had a lot of money already, we'd go out and buy new property, we might not pick any of these sites. So we're already working within a box. And that's why we are somewhat constrained by all these alternatives.
So I guess the question I'd have for the Humane Society is if we put it at that location, would it be acceptable to you to have it as an indoor facility? Because as Randy said, there's an awful lot of people who live over there. There's the Women's Crisis Center, and then you have behavioral health, mental health, where they have clients coming in and they're conducting programs and classes. And then you have the library. So
those were some of the reasons why we selected the other side. I think you're going to have political problems with those residences over there because you're not going to be able to tell them that they're not going to hear dog barking. And again, it's sort of amazing to me that if you took the center of the campus of the county campus and you put a shelter in the middle of it, it really precludes you from doing a whole lot of other things that would be more essential to county services as being conducted by the county. I mean, if the Humane Society is involved in this, we are going to be participants in it. We intend to be running the adoption center, and that's not, again, they expect the county to do their mandated services, provide their mandated services. So in my discussion with the new sheriff, and I don't want to speak for him, but we also offered at the other site that they could have a substation for the sheriff's department at the Vallecito site. So, we want a site. The bottom line, we want a site.
Karen, isn't this a joint facility, though?
Yes, public-private partnership.
Correct.
Correct.
Let me ask one other question while you're at the podium. It seems that the cost, particularly of delivery of utilities, varies rather significantly between the sites, this one being the one that seems to have the most stuff already there.
Already there, that's correct.
What's your assessment of your ability to raise the difference? Since your preferred site...
If we're talking about $5 million for a new shelter, I'm not too sure that $100,000 is significant. There is a difference, and I don't know that you don't make up the difference in prolonged political aggravation.
Well, there's a time factor, but my thinking is that nobody's going to come up with $5 million up front, and being able to build something right away and convert from really the very bad thing that we have now to something significantly better is the time factor and the cost factor. You got to have your utilities in before you have anything. Even phase one needs those utilities, and you'd have to raise a lot more money up front to just be able to have a facility at all, whereas in this particular case you have to raise a lot less for that purpose, and you'd be right away, whatever funds you had coming in could be used to build a facility, at least the first phase of one. And I guess I'm asking more of a strategic question. I understand the other site looks like it's got a lot of advantages, but what about the practical, let's get something on the ground real soon?
You don't get anything on the ground until we're all ready to go with the total value of doing this project. We have talked earlier about a 10-year time to raise the funds. We expect it wouldn't take that long, certainly. But it's going to have to all be raised before we can start anything.
Are there any other questions on this, Elliot? Yes, did you?
Haven't we given the courts some kind of a commitment that the present animal shelter will be moved before they occupy?
No. No, not to my knowledge. If it is, that's a new surprise. No.
That's a good idea.
No.
Maybe the courts will pay us to move it.
No, I thought that
I tried to get him up for some money today. I was unsuccessful.
There's some land near Starbucks and Angels, maybe.
No.
If we could actually increase the barking, maybe we could extract some kind of contribution.
Okay. Well, we have three options at the moment. I know the committee's looked at many other, 3 or 4 other options around the county, going back to Steve's earlier question. There's still work to be done. I don't know where the board is on their preferences, but I think we at least owe it to staff and the Humane Society to voice some kind of direction and maybe why you're supporting that particular area. Tom, do you have any preference or understanding all the concerns you have about?
No, I understand the issues. It seems to me that if we're going to commit to a site at this point, it would probably be on Government Center or the Vallecito site because there's no land purchase costs. And if you could wait, and you wait till you raise $5 million, then maybe if to send them to a site that CCWD has as a preferable site, then I don't see the $100,000 as being a particular obstacle. I would like to see a new facility. I don't have a particular preference per se. I just want it to be I think if we do build it, it should be an all-indoor facility. I mean, if we're going to build a brand-new facility, it seems to me we should do a state-of-the-art facility and build so that we don't, it's like building the airport and then people develop around you and all of a sudden you have a huge problem. I mean, if we're going to do it, it seems to me we should do a state-of-the-art, all-indoor facility and make it as self-containing as possible. I would like to see that if we build a new facility in whatever location it's placed. I don't really have a strong preference for a particular location. I guess I would sort of defer to the administrative office and the team that was put together by the Humane Society, and I see that I think what you guys have come up with is this Angels site, because I think part of it is that we have enough growth in Government Center, and the future growth that will take place probably isn't particularly compatible to an animal control facility. The negative is that there are additional costs. You've got to service it up here. The sheriff's department has to go up. You have to do the other thing. So I don't have a strong preference for a location.
Okay. Steve?
Well, if I had to make a decision today, which thank goodness I don't, I would be leaning toward the government center for several reasons. One is the cost and the infrastructure already in. Secondly is the architect's view that a lot of sound can be mitigated with new design. Third is the idea that a lot of adoptions are happening around here right off government center. I know for a fact I've got 6 of them, so that's a bunch. And I know other supervisors as well as many county employees and hospital personnel and others that are right in the neighborhood actually have traditionally got their animals there. So, and switching it would have some level of disruption. If in fact we're going to wait till we have $5 million, I fear that a lot of animals will die and a lot of ones won't be adopted in the time frame that it would take to get that. And so that's how I'd make my decision today. But I actually think Tom raised some interesting concerns, the idea that we would really want to talk with angels being one of them.
Well, we did talk to angels. They weren't left out.
All right,
we did talk to the city planner.
But getting some of those questions resolved in terms of their long-term...
A casual conversation, one conversation with David.
No, there's lots more.
Right, it's their planning process.
Conversation.
Right.
They have a general plan.
That's right.
They may have
That's
some designated uses that may not be compatible. I don't know. And I think we do...
You know, if we're going to go with that one, maybe we should have a joint study session with the city council, maybe up in Angels, and talk about it and make sure that we're all of one mind so we don't get down the road and then create ill will. The city thinking of the county.
Or any more than we already might have. So my thinking...
It's not with the county, it's not with the city, it's what we already have.
I understand. At any rate, I did have one other thing I wanted to mention, which is that I do value tremendously the Humane Society. You're the folks who are going to drive this engine. And in my thought, your opinions matter a great deal. So for me, what I would ask is that process for a short time continue to a more of a universal recommendation between the government center site and the Vallecito site, and that Angels, if we're going to get more serious about if that's the trend toward that we do what Tom's talking about, which is have a joint working with Angels Camp, that we get this done. I don't want to waste a lot of time. I really think I'm thrilled that finally we're moving from whether we're going to do this to where we're going to do this. And then I think it'll be real nice to get to when we're going to do it. But this is a good step. Let's get this done quickly, and let's see whether we can get whatever group is working on this to get the questions that have been raised here answered and a final recommendation for it really quickly.
Mr. Tuffanelli?
Well, I think that the idea here was, with the Humane Society, was to get a site, and then it would help them in their fundraising. That we do have a dedicated site from the city. I hate to think that we would spend 10 years getting the funding and pick government center and then build it, and then 10 years after that find out it's in the wrong place. We need to expand the government center. I can understand that aspect of it. But in the short-term range, I understand the aspect of having it here in order to get it up and running quickly. The infrastructure is there. The cost certainly would be less. But in 10 years from now, with this piece of property at Vallecito Road and Highway 4 being within the sphere of influence of the city, will the city expand that way in those 10 years or even 20 years? In 20 years from now, will that be encroaching upon the city moving out that way? And then complaints from residents that the local animal facility is making too much noise and too much of an odor. for the residents there. But my preference, I would like to see all the players, the CAO, the city, and the Humane Society get together on this site in Vallecito Road and Highway 4 and Angels, and see what the long-term planning is for the city and how it affects them. That would be my preference. I don't think 20 years from now, once we get it built and it's there, that it's going to be properly situated here at Government Center. I just see problems down the road for it, the long-term range.
Mr. Thomas?
Well, I've heard people from the Humane Society say that they're sort of they regard this site and the one at the Government Center as being equally usable. I'm swayed a lot by Captain Ballard and Sergeant Murray's comments about how usable or how disruptive it would be to move the facility from here out to Vallecito. I'm not sure exactly what this surprise to me is that we wouldn't really expect to break ground on anything until we got $5 million in a pot. I thought we were going to go forward with a little bit faster development program than that. I think that there's certainly the possibility exists that the model for the running and the maintenance of the facility, there might be a different model 10 years from now than we currently have. It may be less important to have it here 10 years from now than it currently is. So I guess I'm kind of revealing to you that I don't have a specific preference. I am keenly aware that there may be huge obstacles in the neighborhood putting it over here by the library. I would like to seek a solution that would avoid that. It's unfortunate that we didn't have an opportunity to flesh out more of the possibilities that exist on this 15-acre site. Certainly, we don't need 15 acres, but if there was another, we talked about a partnership, if there was another developer that was willing to make that site something that they were willing to do a development jointly. The other, Captain Ballard, you mentioned that there would never be any development up on the hillside up above the Justice Complex. If I do the arithmetic right, I think we purchased 54 acres up there, and we're going to develop 11. Why isn't it possible that we could spend a few minutes analyzing what a site would look like on the remaining 30-plus acres?
Look at it to see what if we could build a site up there?
Yeah.
Well, I think anything is possible. There's a lot of alternatives up there. I mean, that's something that would have to be discussed later. But what I was referring to as far as like the trails and areas that we could put in is when we did our negative declaration, and we kind of deemed one area over there that we would never touch. It was near the cemetery, and although it's not in the cemetery, it is a very good place. It's very scenic. It would be a nice place for dog trails. That's what I was referring to. To get into the issue of the additional or remainder of the property that's up there, that would be somebody else, your guys' decision.
The district attorney will fight some of that.
Certainly, and there are things that are going up there.
Yeah,
But that's
well,
what
we'd have to do a full, open up the environmental review. And
You don't propose
you're
an
not-
inmate walking facility up there?
Talk to the judges.
Quite a few years ago, I was approached by some of the members of the Humane Society and had wonderful ideas with the inmates and inmate dog programs and those types of things. And in order for me to facilitate that or even look at it to see that's another reason, closer to the jail, it could help me facilitate that inmate animal welfare program, which is a good program.
Thank you, Ken.
We should also mention that right next door is a number of the social activities for the behavioral health program, and why there's not some kind of link there kind of baffles me. In the healing aspects of animals, seems to me that we have some program interaction that might need to take place sooner rather than later.
Therapeutic. That's right. I just want to clarify the 10-year thing. When we first got up here a year ago already, and I've been at this for 2 years, we said we would like a deal with the county on a piece of property that would allow us within a 10-year period to fund and build this shelter with a long-term lease at the end of that. So that's what the 10-year thing was about. It's not like it's going to take us 10 years to do that. I certainly will be dead by then probably, and I don't want to do that. But so that's where the 10 years came in. And as I say, we've already gone 2 years into this idea. So I just didn't want anybody to think we're just going to wait for 10 years and then build this thing. So.
Thank you, Karen. I guess it's my turn. I do not, as much as I'd like it at Government Center, I do not like that location. It's way too close to residents. It's close to offices, behavioral health, mental health programs, and the library. Once this goes in, I will guarantee you, this will be off the radar screen of everyone, well, especially supervisors anyway, because, gee, we have one. And so in 5 or 10 years after it's built, I can't remember which one of you said, it's out of sight, it's going to be out of sight, out of mind. There's noise. Steve brought up the issue of the large animals. I thought I heard Sergeant Lenny say, we'd have to find another location for them. They do bring odors. I think as much as I'd like to have it on campus, I don't think this is the proper location. My choice is Highway 49 and Angels Road. And I don't know how detailed any discussion has been, Brian, with CCWD, but I would like to think maybe we could have some discussion with them, and if they need to sell it for more than $1, that we could figure out what that cost would be. Now is the time to do it with properties. So that's one. I don't think there was just, $399,000 that was a figure based on years ago. The other is on Caltrans. I'm not real clear in listening to the discussion on exactly what has been discussed. Somebody, I think you might have mentioned, $1 million. $1 million for what? That's not clear to me. That way, if it's in San Andreas, it gives room for growth, because once this is in, we're looking at something that's going to be here for 40 years. We're not looking at something for 10 years. And Gary had a good point. Put it in, and in 10 years we want to do something else, and we're going to be having the same conversation in 10 years. It would help the Sheriff's Department in that it's close proximity, but so for me, that's my first choice. I don't think we have enough information to say no. Maybe CCWD, since they want to be such partners with us on land use, would be willing to be partners with us in this in terms of the financial cost of the land.
What do you think, General Manager?
So that's my, okay, so that's my first choice. And my second choice is, given the concerns or the challenges for Highway 4 in Vallecito, because we all need to look, we have been waiting for years. We've been talking about this. So to think we're going to put something in and in 10 years start this process over again, it isn't going to happen. So I'm not sure that you have 3 votes for anything in particular. So I think there needs to be more information garnered. I think that you and the Humane Society have the attention of the board. And I think some more discussions, as Supervisor Tryon mentioned, with the City of Angels, that needs to be tightened up. And I'd like to see something tightened up on the other San Andreas site. As for the one here on Government Center, it sounds like a quick fix, and I don't think any of us want a quick fix. So Jeannie or Brian, where is it that you're planning on going? I think we need to come back for another study session, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to just have to, we'll talk to Karen and the Humane Society, and Brian and I will convene, but I think we're going to need some additional conversations with the city folk and with Caltrans and
maybe
CCWD. I mean, we're just going to need some time to flush out.
Maybe if you meet with the city, you take Tom with you, because it sounds like you've already had many conversations with the city.
We had initial conversations with the city.
And Tom has some concerns, so...
You're going to get to
Okay. Is there any
we'll come back again.
Are there any for Karen? On behalf of the board, we really appreciate the work that your team has done, and I wish we could have given you an easy answer, let's go today, but nothing worth fighting for is always easy. So if there's no further comments, this meeting stands adjourned.
Sorry there, I meant X, General Manager. We want you to take this back to the board, though, and we would like